Good morning, dobro jutro.
Dobro jutro, jel me čuješ?
Čujem, sve.
Super, nisam znao da mi radi mikrofon.
Da, meni tako dere.
A di si na moru?
U Dubrovniku sam, u sveučilištu.
Aha.
Sve se radi online.
Pa dobro, ajde.
Ali imam boravak ovdje, znači imam odličnu suradnju sa njima, ovdje sa odjelom za komunikologiju.
Di, Zagrebačko sveučilište?
Ne, u Dubrovniku.
To je, čekaj, Inter-University Center ili sveučilište u Dubrovniku?
Sveučilište u Dubrovniku.
Aha, pa dobro, ajde.
Državni. A onda je odjel za komunikologiju, a sa njima imam 7 godina prije suradnje.
Pa to je super.
Pa dobro smo poznati i to, a ja odmah koristim ovaj cepus. Ovo nije baš veliki novac, ali ja se zahvaljujem za to da sam došao ovdje. Super je.
To je.
I radim i na slovačkom, i mom, ali sve ide online, idemo online, imamo ispit i to.
Da. Gledaj, ja sam isto informacijske komunikacijske znanosti doktorat, pa ako hoćeš, ja te mogu neki put preporučiti na Filozofski fakultet u Zagrebu, na doktorske studije i sveučilište Sjever, ako hoćeš.
Super, zahvaljujem se, to bi bilo odlično.
Da.
Zbog toga da imamo, mislim da se mi dvoje čujemo, imam neke podatke i jedan projekt kojim radimo zbog radikalizacije i može i neki hibrid Wi-Fi, svakako naš državni, a idemo. Jesmo u vezi, a čujemo se kasnije.
Može, imaš moj broj.
Da, šalim sve. Vidimo se, mislim, u Sukošanu.
Da.
Dobar,
kažu mi prijatelji, jer nama je kuća baš na moru.
Aha.
Ispred mog balkona i terase je jedno 200 kvadrata vrt i onda je kratka šetnica, 1 metar širine, samo za pješake i plaža i gledaš na jug cijelo vrijeme ovo.
Super, odlično. Ja često dolazim u Tribunj, onda.
Aha, pa dobro, to je blizu.
To je blizu. Meni se sviđa ovdje. A idem na godišnji.
Da. Ajde, možeš doći sada i malo i do nas onda.
Da, sigurno. Imam auto, nije problem.
Da.
Stižem. Imame. Good morning, profesor. Ne znam, ili nas vidi.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning.
From Thessaloniki.
Oh.
Kalimera.
Καλημέρα σας. Να είστε καλά.
And we are not alone. Darko, are you there? Or we came too early? It looks like that we are too early. Let's come.
Malo, 5 minuta još.
I'm going back to Zagreb today for a weekend. And then at Monday, I'm going to be back here, I hope, for 2 weeks. Rasto, microphone. Rasto, we cannot hear you, it's microphone.
Da, ok, sorry. Jesam ovdje do 7. još 3 tjedna i posle idem gore.
Aha.
A ću ostati još u Hrvatske, mislim, mjesec ili 2.
Ti dobiješ naše državljanstvo bez problema, meni se čini.
Da, meni su prijatelji ovdje da jesu izbori, da dobijemo od HZD državljanstvo i oni glasam da.
Hello,
Yeah.
so you can speak Serbian, both of you.
Serbian.
Da. Državljanstvo. Moram ići na izbori.
For our colleagues from China, our friend Kazansky, professor from Slovakia, from Mateja Bell, and Professor Gordan Akrap from Croatia, from Institute of Hybrid Warfare. So I just remind them to speak in English. I told them stop to speak Serbian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Darko,
We will interrupt.
No, you see, Darko forget that within Slovenia, within the Slavic languages, okay, despite the fact the differences between Croatian and Serbian, but Croatian language has quite a lot of similarities with Slovak language.
Yeah.
Yes,
If you speak quite slowly, we can understand to each other.
For sure.
because the Slovakian have a root in Serbian, so that's the explanation.
You know, Darko is still thinking that this explaining that speak Serbian so that the whole world can understand you is valid.
Yeah.
So I want to welcome all of you. We are waiting a few other guys. Demetrios is here, Professor Shao Yan, Kongwen Fi. So we start a little bit earlier just to test that everything it's okay, that we hear each other well. So is it sounds and video okay for all of you?
Yeah, I can hear from you.
Yeah, it's working well with me.
Hey, Danuta. Hello, Danuta. Can you hear us, Danuta?
Not
Danuta
yet.
is with the flowers.
Microphone is turned off, Nuta.
Good morning, Dargo. I can hear you loud and clear.
Good, excellent. So it is very simple. We will have one speaker from China, one from Europe, and then that will be the order, basically. The main goal of the conference before we start is to understand each other, to figure out what is a problem between, if there is problem, because these days we are receiving the informations from many sides, malign influence of Russia, malign influence of China, negative influence of China. For Russia, it's very clear and it's very visible that throughout the Europe there is arresting of Russian spies in Bulgaria, in Sweden, in Netherlands, and many, even in Serbia. One of the colonel was kicked out from Serbia 1.5 years ago. And but I want to understand this kind of the media articles and attitudes from think tanks, as well from even from government officials, from European Union and US as well. Why China? What is problem with China? So we are very keen to understand. Is there any problem? What are the problem, and how we can actually overcome the problem on our, let's say, academic way. I am very happy that today we will have a lot of distinguished speakers, but I will stop here because I have to keep some words from the real opening at 10 o'clock. But anyhow, I see the Rasta is in very good mood. Rasta, you are in Croatia, I think.
Ovo je sunce. This is a sun impact.
You don't have flowers on your table like Danuta. Danuta, unmute your microphone. You mute your microphone. We cannot hear you. Unmute the microphone.
Yes.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Good morning.
Yes. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning to all. Good morning to all professors. Good morning to you, Professor Trifunovic. I'm satisfied and glad to see you all. I'm very happy. This is part of my garden because I'm living at the apartment with the garden. So this is the spring in Poland.
Oh, good. So we have now beautiful Polish flowers. So
yes.
We have also Alberto.
Lily of the
Alberto.
valley, lilac. So.
Ciao, Alberto. How are you doing? Unmute. 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 You are. We cannot hear you, Alberto.
Yeah, okay, I saw the dog.
Oh, so now we can hear you. And you have greetings for one special guest. I have no flower here, but I have one guest in my room. So hello from it. How are you doing, Alberto?
Very well, very well. I had a bit of trouble to understand the chat time. So I need to convert it because
Which time?
the CET, the CET
It's Central
time.
European time. So
Yeah. So it's 1 hour. Yeah. So
it's
now I
okay.
know.
I see our Chinese colleagues already sleepy after working day. They are finishing their working day.
4 p.m. here. Yeah.
So yeah, 5 more minutes before the start. And also before the start, this is the first conference of this kind. The next will be Europe, India, and Japan with Professor Panda. And we have also Professor Panda with us. Hello, Professor. How are you doing, sir? Unmute. You have to unmute. You need to unmute. Yes.
Yes, Professor Darko. Good to meet you, and good afternoon to everybody from New Delhi. And pleasure to meet you all. As Professor Darko mentioned, I am just thinking about India, Europe, and Japan. We are still yet to discuss about the idea and the host institute, but once it is finalized, maybe we'll share it with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Panda. So, do we have all our Chinese colleagues with us, or no, not yet?
I guess we are still missing someone.
Oh, Professor Jian. Hello, Professor Jian. Unmute the microphone. And Professor Jian from FUDAN.
Okay. Yes.
He is with Professor Zhang Jiaodong, main responsible for this conference. And I would like to thank Professor Jian and, of course, Professor Zhang. Yes, he cannot attend, but you can say a few words. Why? Where is our Professor Zhang? So this conference we're going to co-chair Professor Jian Jumbo. He was a deputy ambassador in Croatia, and maybe he can send some smile to our Gordon in Croatia.
Thank you.
Okay, good. We have Professor Xu Mingqi, a distinguished professor from Shanghai Academy of Social Science. So, Professor, thank you for joining, and we are all welcoming you. If you want to say something, just unmute the microphone.
Hello, Darko.
Hello, Professor. Welcome.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
It's good for you to organize this webinar with Professor Jan, and I hope that we can have a very good discussion on this topic. I'm going to listen to you. Yeah.
Professor, you are the most senior among us, and definitely, when we start 10 o'clock, I would like to give you floor for a few sentences from your side. So prepare to say at least few sentences, because I consider you as the most senior. We have also Jan Anthony from Sweden with us. Hello, Jan. We are getting you. If you want to say something, unmute just the microphone.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Very good. So thank you for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
So great. Thank you for joining us. And who else we need? It's actually 2 more minutes. Oh, Danuta with flowers again with us. Also Demetrios. Demetrios, I will say a few words about it. I'm sorry, I now see you because you come up now on top. Demetrios Tsalis is a Rear Admiral of the retired from Greek Army, and we will enjoy, of course, his presentation as well today. I hope his students will join for War College from Greece.
I hope to. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to speak to such distinguished audience and also with so many instructors of university for this subject. So we will see about that.
Thank you, Demetrios. So we have 1 more minute before we start. I think many people are joining. I would like to remind you, all of you, that after this conference, we would like to publish the article in our journal, articles from all distinguished speakers at our journal, Security Science Journal. it will be the special issue. And as soon as you finish with articles, I think we put end of the August 31st as a deadline for submission, that we can give 1 month for reviewers, and that the issue will appear maybe in the first week of October as well. Thomas, welcome, Thomas from Netherlands. If you want to say something, yes.
Thomas is from Denmark and
I'm sorry.
resides with his wife in Germany.
Okay. Sorry, Thomas. No problem. So it's 10 o'clock. I think it's a good time to start. I think other people will join. First of all, I would like to say thanks for all of you to join this webinar. As I said, we have a lot of information from different sides about China, positive and negative informations, and about Chinese influence to Europe. And last week, actually 2 weeks ago, I had a German delegation, and they said to me, "Oh, China, why spreading malign influence?" And my answer to them, "Okay, good. If China is malign, why you have at least three factories in China? BMW, Mercedes, and Audi. Why you don't just bring this factory to Croatia, Serbia, or Montenegro, and we will solve the problem?" Oh, they say, "Oh, that will not happen." So I understand that something is wrong with that, and it is good now opportunity to discuss with our colleagues from China, academicians, from our main partner, our Institute of National and International Security. We do have a partnership agreement with two important institutions in China. One is FUDAN University, and second is the Shanghai Academy of Social Science. And this event today is in reorganizing with FUDAN, which is one of the prestigious university in China. And we would like to actually listen carefully what our colleagues from China and Europe have to say about mutual relations, in order to find out and to allocate what is the problem, and how we can actually solve the problem, and how we can inform our decision makers about possible solutions if the problem arises. So without any further ado, I will explain the order of the speaker will be first from China, then from Europe, and then vice versa. And I would like to give the floor to Professor Xu Mingqi to say a few sentences, because he is the most senior Chinese officials among us. Professor Xu Mingqi, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Dr. for organizing this. Well, I think that EU, China, and at large, many European countries and China are, having some problems in promoting and maintaining good economic and political relations at this kind of juncture, because mass media focus a lot on the so-called human rights issues and geopolitical considerations and potential threat of China. And to me, most of these information are not accurate. I will not say disinformation. Most of these accusations are based on the kind of misunderstanding or biased belief that what is happening here in China is going to have a lot of negative impact on European countries, on the world, the human beings at large. But I think if those who have come to China and visit China frequently, and especially follow what is really happening here in China, I think these kind of misunderstanding or distrust, are groundless. So I hope that those who really have, these intention to understand what is really going on, especially after this, COVID-19 pandemic, and the reason, economic and political development here in China, would, find some independent and reliable sources and information, and exchange ideas with different kind of Chinese, think tanks and universities, and maybe ordinary Chinese people understand, much better things of China. Then, a kind of more balanced, correct, understanding and kind of evaluation on what is going on in China will gradually, replace this kind of biased or misconceptual kind of narrative or information. And I will not say that there is no problems here in China, both in economic and political development. And there will be some problems, for instance, with the, economic development, and especially these pursuing of these Belt and Road Initiative. Some Chinese company are not really, following the basic principle and only see short-term, economic interests, may not pay attention to these environmental issues and to corporate, responsibility issues. I think that these could be, discussed and criticized on a more accurate technical point of view. And also, here in China, things happening in Xinjiang and in some other places, I think those who really understand what is happening in Europe, is terrorist attack on the ordinary people, on civilians. What is really happening here in Xinjiang and even in nearby provinces, and what the Chinese government try to maintain social stability and security, and these measures have been taken and on a really more, detailed and accurate assessment. I think recently, former Italian vice economic minister, visited Xinjiang and have a lot of, discussions with Uyghur people there, and visited these mosques and Uyghur people and market, and see a lot of real things. And he photoed and make a lot of videos already, disseminated on these group and the personal, these WeChat and other kind of media. I think that these sort of things could really be a good reference for the European friends. So I think that today's discussion, we can make a more frank and more open discussion on this, and in order to get a kind of more accurate senses how European countries and China could work together to deal with these topics, and to promote our economic and diplomatic and other kind of cooperation in the future. So I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you for Professor so much. Without any further ado, I would like to call Professor Danuta Gibas-Krzak to address the first speech. Danuta, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Trifunovic. I'd like to welcome once again all famous professors. I'm very glad and satisfied and happy to join this meeting. Thank you for invitation, Professor Trifunovic. I will present my main thesis of this speech about Chinese influence in the Western Balkans in the light of geopolitical studies. The Balkans are located, as we know, at the crossroads of strategic transport corridors between Europe, Africa, and Asia, constituting an area that has specific geopolitical dynamics, which makes them of interest to the major players in the world. The characteristic fact is that the region has had a different role in various historical periods, which has always depended on external factors. Thus, the Balkans were perceived as the most unstable area in Europe, and at the same time subordinated to stronger actors. Until the end of the First World War, the Balkans were at the crossroads of three empires, Ottoman, Russian, and Austro-Hungarian, which despite influence had an important feature in common. Their centers were located outside the Balkans, and the Balkans constituted the sphere of influence of these powers. Classical geopolitical theories indicate that the location of the Balkans can be interpreted in two ways. First of all, the Balkan Peninsula can be situated in both the heartland, so-called heartland, and so-called rimland. According to the first theory, the Balkans are the gateway to the heartland, which is the central point of Eurasia. Rule over this part of world provides the opportunity for global domination, primarily because all the major expansion in history have originated in this area. The creator of the heartland theory, Professor Halford John Mackinder, admitted that its border cannot be clearly defined. In fact, he repeatedly changed its boundaries, once limiting it to the Russian territory, and another times extending it all the way to Mongolia. The global geopolitical position of the Balkans is also taken into account by the rimland theory, as I said earlier, which was developed by Professor Nicholas Spykman. This geopolitician believed that after the Second World War, the greatest political significance would fall on the rimland zone, which is located on the periphery of the Eurasian continent over Pacific, Indian Ocean, Atlantic, and Mediterranean. In these classical geopolitical theories, the Balkans also function as a gateway to the interior of Europe. This location influences important external factors to more easily pursue the strategic interest in both of these approaches. The peninsula is a region subordinated to external factors. Does not change the fact that the Balkans is characterized by a utopian illusion of its own strong position in international relations and division of influence. This is particularly evident with regard to Serbia, which is a typical example of Balkan dualism, and still wishes to play an important role in the international relations, which during the Cold War fell to federal communist Yugoslavia. While discussing the Chinese policy and strategic position in the Balkans, it is important to take into account that China, unlike Russia and Turkey, is a relatively new geopolitical player in the Balkans, with its dynamic interest in the region growing in the 21st century. Thus, the Chinese cannot appeal to tradition and shared history, although during the Cold War, they did engage in cooperation with communist countries. For example, they carried substantial economic aid and political support to Albania during the Hoxha regime and cooperated with Yugoslavia. President Tito valued contacts with the Chinese communists who were largely independent of United Soviet Union. In the 21st century, Chinese close and institutionalized cooperation with the post-Yugoslavia states date basically from the establishment in 2012 of the 16+1 cooperation program. The countries of the Western Balkans have found Chinese investment attractive to them as they face various transformation problems after the end of civil war in the former Yugoslavia. In particular, the outdated rail and road infrastructure requires significant financial investment. The length of railroads in the Balkans countries is 40% less than European Union average. And the density of highways is up to 60% less than European average. Moreover, the dramatic impoverishment of the population, significant unemployment, especially among young people, brain drain, and the dire need for investment in industry have made Chinese investors very welcome, taking on the role of the providential husband for the Balkans, in fact. The Western Balkans is also attractive to a Chinese partner because of its geographical location at the intersection of land and sea routes that connect China to Black Sea, the Atlantic Sea, the Baltic Sea. Under the cooperation of the three maritime regions, ports in the Baltic Sea, Adriatic Sea, Black Sea are to be developed. The port will be connected by an extensive network of roads and railroads, which are financed and built by the Chinese capital. It seems that by entering into cooperation with the Chinese, the Western Balkans countries are competing with each other for the role of Chinese logistic hub on the old continent. However, it should be noted that Chinese efforts to take control of the Balkan ports and establish industrial zones date back to the end of 2000 year. The port Piraeus, which has been assigned the role of Chinese European outpost to be the flagship of Chinese investment. Chinese entrepreneurs are also planning to invest in Adriatic ports such as Bar in Montenegro, Rijeka, Croatia, Koper, Slovenia, which are to be connected to other countries by road and rail. This is very important. But an important role and place is to be given to the connection of Serbia to the port of Bar and railroad line connecting Koper and Rijeka to Central Europe. Serbia undoubtedly plays first fiddle in the Sino-Balkan cooperation. Serbia's attitude towards China is definitely positive, which is related to the pro-Chinese policy pursued by the President Aleksandar Vučić, but also to the long-standing cooperation between Serbia and China. It has resulted, among others, in extensive exchange of students and scientists, as well as in the growing popularity of the Chinese language. Currently, the pandemic situation has opened a new chapter in Chinese-Serbian cooperation, which has acquired the dimension of often greater strategic rapprochement. After receiving a shipment of medical equipment from China, Serbian President Vučić announced that the concept of European solidarity does not exist. The politician recognized China, the politician in Serbia, recognized China as the only country able to help Serbia. After the plane with the equipment landed in March 2020, Vučić kissed the Chinese flag, and billboards with the slogan, "Thank you, brother Chinese," were presented in Belgrade. The supply of Chinese vaccine has enabled Serbia to become a leader in vaccination against COVID-19. In addition, the opportunity to be vaccinated has also been offered to citizens of neighboring states, Bosnia and Herzegovina, North Macedonia, Montenegro, and Croatia. Opinion polls show that 75% of Serbs believe that China must help their country during the pandemic. Only 3% of surveyed pointed to the European Union, and more than half of Serbs express no desire to join the European community. Nevertheless, the relationship with Beijing is important for Serbia from a geopolitical point of view, as it allows for a policy of balancing against pressure on Belgrade from the West, especially from the European Union, which cares about transparency in economic transactions and demands that Serbia recognize Kosovo independence. Meanwhile, China maintains Serbia's position on Kosovo and also condemns NATO bombing of Serbia in 1999, during which the Chinese embassy in Belgrade was destroyed. It is hypothesized that during the NATO-Yugoslavia conflict, a Chinese satellite intelligence provided assistance to the Serbs. After the bombing, China supported Yugoslav industry, transferring millions of dollars to Yugoslavia to help rebuild the republic's damaged infrastructure. China also undertook military cooperation with Serbia, currently cooperating in the supply of equipment and armament. Currently, cooperation in this area is being strengthened, reflected, among others, in Serbia obtaining Chinese unmanned aerial vehicles. Many analysts believe that China has dastardly used the pandemic state to increase its influence in the Balkans. This cooperation proves that China is an important player in the international area, and through this supply of vaccine, its position has been further strengthened. How significant is this for the Western Balkans? We can ask this question. Analysts point out that the authorities of the Balkan states, including their local government, are eager to use the Chinese source of financing. This is because it is competitive with the European Union proposals, especially since Brussels is demanding concrete reform in return for financial support. However, the Balkan states have limited borrowing capacity due to the high debt level. Furthermore, the weakness of their administration means that they are unable to prepare and quickly implement project modernization attractive to the Chinese party. This is evidenced by the successive delays in the modernization of the Belgrade-Budapest connection. This is noted that there is a danger of the of the Western Balkans country becoming dependent of on China and so-called debt trap diplomacy, because Beijing is responsible for about 15% of the liabilities of Serbia and Bosnia and Herzegovina, as well as 20% for North Macedonia and 40% for Montenegro. China's involvement in the Western Balkans changes the geopolitical image of the region, of course, especially as European Union policymakers have not yet determined their policy in relations to this region. Will they develop initiatives towards the further European integration of the Western Balkans, or will they try to turn the region into a new buffer zone? The inaction of Western European governments is exploited by China, the influence of which also becomes competitive with American involvement and the Turkish policy of neo-Ottomanism. The Chinese presence in the Balkans makes it clear that Chinese aspirations are in the modern global world. This is combined with the idea of Sino-expansion, showing the significant development opportunity of Eurasia. China, in proposing new global solutions, develops the concept of a new world geoeconomic as opposed to geopolitical system. The terminology of Chinese politics refers to the creation of a community of shared destiny or the fulfillment of the Chinese dream. What implication will this have for the Balkans? We can ask another question. The neorealist paradigm shows that nothing is given for free. It is possible that under the guise of investment aid, China seeks to make the Balkans its sphere of influence. It may happen that, contrary to the previous narrative, Beijing will make political demands or impose solutions on the Balkan community that are alien to the European sense of freedom. An example would be the installation in Belgrade of more than 1,000 surveillance cameras manufactured by Huawei that have facial recognition software. The surveillance system was installed in Belgrade, in the Republic Square. Thus, Belgrade, in fact, became the first European city to install smart cameras, so-called smart cameras, becoming a showcase and at the same time an advertisement for Chinese surveillance technology. Although more important is the question of who will be the operator of this data and how it will be used later. Meanwhile, activists of the Open Society Foundation in Belgrade point out that there is no consultation in parliament or among experts on this issue. No information was publicly provided to explain why Belgrade needed it. Such an action may indicate, albeit ambiguously, a progressive dependence on Chinese policy and technology. It may be wondered whether Serbia is a pilot project of the Chinese in their march to Europe. In the context of Chinese cooperation with the Western Balkans, politicians in the Balkans should, I think, realize whether they can continue to balance between stronger actors on the international stage. At the same time, there is no doubt that without external factors, the Western Balkan states will not be able to meet the challenges of the globalization era. it is also important to keep in mind that this cooperation should not turn into a domination of the stronger players, once again changing the geopolitical image of this part of the old continent. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm giving the floor to Professor Trifunovic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Danuta, so much. We have to now run because we have Professor Zhang Xiatong from Chinese side. We know he is in rush. So, Professor, without further ado, floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think that today's discussion is very much geopolitical map focused. In particular, my previous speaker, she mentioned John Mackinder, the British geographer's heartland theory, and also Professor Nicholas Spikeman's rimland theory. Indeed, Balkans is strategically situated. So if we look at the map, we know how important both economically and politically the Balkans is. But if we take a look at the larger picture of the whole European Union and its neighborhood, I think Europe herself, in particular, the European Union herself, is largely situated in both heartland and rimland. If we look at the whole Central and Eastern Europe, it is situated in the heartland. So he who controls the heartland controls the world island. He who controls the world island controls the world. And also Western Europe, in particular, the coastal Europe is situated in rimland. So I think the whole Europe Union and her eastern neighborhood are both situated in a geopolitically sensitive zone. So this is the larger context. So that's a very important part when Chinese policymakers look at China-EU policy, because the whole European Union, according to Chairman Mao Zedong, is the middle land, is the second zone between the USSR and the United States back in 1970s. However, we have to say that the classic geopolitics is like a pendulum, right? If we go back to 1990s, we could say those old classical geopolitical theories are outdated. But now it seems that the old classic geopolitics theories is now back in fashion. In particular, when the United States is implementing the so-called Indo-Pacific strategy during President Trump's era. And now the EU is also pushing forward the EU version of Indo-Pacific strategy. And the president of the European Commission, von der Leyen, even labeled her commission as a geopolitical commission. So this is indeed intellectually a geopolitical turn for the European Union. My question is whether China should also adopt this kind of geopolitical turn in China's policy planning and policy implementation. By instinct, Chinese policymakers prefer geoeconomics rather than geopolitics. Chinese policymakers hope that the BRI would not be perceived as a geopolitical vehicle. Instead, the BRI would be an economic initiative bringing together the countries along the Belt and Road initiative, including the Balkan countries, including Serbia. Serbia is extremely important economic partner for China's BRI. So this is the first point I want to mention, that we need to be concerned about the geopolitical turn of the European Commission and the whole European Union, which I call it's becoming a geopolitical Europe. or Europa Geopolitica. My second point is that the EU, when it comes into international trade negotiation, is often played a role as a leverage power. So in other words, the EU is very sensitive to use economic, political, and geopolitical resources as a leverage in the chessboard of other great powers. So I think it's quite interesting if we look at the Europe from the perspective of leverage power Europe. So I was a trade negotiator, so I know when negotiating with the European Commission, the EU policymakers look at not only its trade negotiating partner, but also look at other great powers, in particular the United States. In particular, when it comes to the triangle of US, China, Europe, EU's leverage power is quite significant. Well, I have a lot more to say, but due to time constraints, since I have to catch the train, otherwise the train will leave me. So I stop here. I appreciate this opportunity. I hope our conversation would be continued through the platform established by Chair and my Chinese colleagues, Zheng Junbo, and also Professor Xu Mingqi and other colleagues in both FUDAN and the Shanghai Institute of International Studies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Chiatong. We receive actually two good ideas. After one of the, let's say, good suggestions is that after two speakers, we will allow two questions. So maybe it's a good idea to make a dynamic conversation. And now floor is open. And I think first question is Professor Akrap want to raise the first question, please.
Well, I'm sorry. I have to leave now. Otherwise, I will miss my train. So I'm terribly sorry.
It's okay. We'll have a comment then from Professor Akrap. Thank you, Professor Chiatong. We are expecting your article by the 31st August.
Thank you very much.
And don't miss your train. So.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Professor Akrap, you want to make comments?
Yes, just a few. Thank you, Darko, for this. Thank you for all of the colleagues that you are with us. I hope that you can hear me. Darko, is it okay? Yes. I would like just to add some comments to the previous two distinguished speaker. I agree with the later speaker from China who said that China at this moment does not have any primary focus geopolitical changes, especially in this West Balkan region. It's geo-economical activities and geo-economical influence. And later, if it's going to be possible and if it's going to be necessary to make some political changes. I never saw that China, wherever they come with their economic influence, they do and try to do some kind of political changes, like, for example, Russians are trying to do and are doing in this area. So this is my first comment. Second comment is just to update some information that Danuta from Poland said at the beginning. China did try to get the influence in the Croatian port of Rijeka, but I think 10 days ago the government closed the tender, and the tender won by the Maersk from Holland and PPD company from Croatia. But what is not so publicly known, the China's investors bought the majority of the shares in the city port of the city of Zadar that is in the middle of the coast. That's something what is going on with them. I'm not afraid that about the China's investments in the Western Balkan countries like Serbia, Montenegro, Bosnia and Herzegovina, North Macedonia. It's more the question about them to do that and to raise them. The quantity and the amount and the intensity of the economical cooperation between China and, for example, some of the EU countries like the Benelux countries, Germany, France, Italy, and Denmark are incredible, or UK, despite the fact that UK is not anymore in the EU, is incredibly high. So these are the facts that has to be analyzed, that has to be accepted. And it's not necessary to make some kind of China as a enemy goes here, especially in the countries of the West Balkan 6 countries. But in any case, as Danuta said, there is no such a thing like a free lunch. Everybody who wants to invest somewhere needs to find the money in the international financial market. Is it going to be by the European Monetary Fund, by the International Monetary Fund, or China? That's their responsibility. But we have to divide it, and we have to use it in a way that it should be done in a proper way. And this is one of the reasons why I think that this region, those several countries, need to adopt as faster as they can the rules and the acquis communautaire of the European Union, so that they can know how to react and how to work with the money, to take responsibility and share it with the other countries, and to decrease the level of the corruption. And at the end, sorry, Nuta, but when Croatian is here, when Croatian heard that somebody is talking about the civil wars in Yugoslavia during the 90s, we don't like it, because we don't think that it was like that, despite the fact, I know that Darko and I, we were on the other side, but it doesn't mean that we cannot work today. It was not civil war in Yugoslavia, just for your comment. This is just briefly comment, if I can, and I'm open for any question if someone wants to comment with me. Thank you, Darko.
Thank you, Gordon. The next is Jan Anthony. Sir, floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. I just wanted to make a spontaneous comment, really, since I can't ask a question to the last speaker, and it's related to how the issue of geopolitics is viewed today. There is often a reference to Mackinder when people talk about geopolitics. But I wonder really to what extent that's a useful starting point. Mackinder was writing his book, his most famous book, at a time when Russia and Japan were at war. And the issue was whether it was necessary to control the territory of China in order to achieve imperial ambitions, because Russia and Japan were both, well, neither of them were states as we understand the term today. So this heartland-rimland theory was developed in a very specific context of a war between a continental state and a maritime state. This is not the world we live in today. There isn't going to be that type of contest. So when you look at this from a European perspective, the issue for geopolitics, if you like, is whether it can still be essentially a matter of interstate relations, or whether a body like the European Union, which has some supra-state characteristics, can be a geopolitical player. Can a supranational body play a meaningful and coherent role globally? This is the question we're facing at the moment in Europe. We don't know the answer to this question. That's the question that's on the table, and it really has very little to do with Mr. Mackinder's book.
Thank you, Jan. We are rushing on time, and of course, as we said, now after 2 speakers, it will be allowed again for 2 comments, and that's how we can maybe easily and better interact. So the next speaker on our list, I'm sorry, Jan, if you don't mind, we'll give the floor before Professor Kazansky. He has to run.
Hello, Professor Trifunovic. I'd like to add something to the comments of my Croatian colleague, if it's possible.
Just brief.
Yes, briefly. I know the history of the ports in Croatia, but I don't have enough time to explain it. As far as concerning the opinion about the Chinese domination, there are some opinion which are in Poland very often. So that is the question: is this influence, geopolitical, political, or domination? This is the open question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Danuta. If you don't mind, Jan, we will give the floor before you. Professor Kazansky, you have something to rush. And I hope, Jan Anthony, you don't mind that Professor Kazansky is before you. Is that okay for you, sir? Okay, thank you. Professor Kazansky, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Darko. Thank you, Ian, for the floor. And thanks a lot to all of you and also to the organizers. I'm sorry, I have just only 2 hours to stay here because a lot of duties I have today. It's a little bit hurry. Sometimes it's like days like this that so much important events are present. Thank you for invitation for this very interesting webinar, because I think that's it's very important topic today. This kind of topic, and especially for me, the first speaker promoted some geopolitical issues of this topic, and for me personally, it's very interesting because the geopolitics is one field of my study and scientific research. So this is very good and for me and inspirative. And also it's very inspirative now these hours to hear very interesting presentation for all of you, and then to read your articles, because I think that it will be very usable for me personally, for you also, and will improve also not our, let's say, the cooperation in a scientific field, but it will be very usable in also in our educational processes and research as well in our home countries. For my side, I should say it very correctly, because for Slovakia, these relations are very much important. Now I would like to speak and present some topics from my point of view. I would like to fulfill these 15 or 20 minutes with my speech. I would like to present the specific issues and relations between the Central Europe and V4 countries. I know that you know the specific platform of political cooperation between or among the Central European countries like Slovakia, Czech Republic, Poland, and Hungary, the specific platform, and the specific approach from the China as a power today, contemporary power, to this specific region. So I would like to divide my speech and presentation, because I was a little bit inspired, and I hope that I will be more, to inform you about the specific issues and specific issues of the relations today. We should little bit come back to the relations and look back into the formation of the relations of the Central Europe, Slovakia, and the China today. We should pay attention that the relations of the independent Slovakia, Slovak Republic, and the China were developed at the base of the heritage, let's say, of the former Czechoslovakia. And this period is not very well mapped as well, but we have a very long tradition of our mutual political and economical cooperation from the history part. We know that we have a common relation formed in 1949 year, when the Czechoslovakia, as a communist country at that period, approved and declared and started to promote the diplomatic relations between the China and Czechoslovakia as well. So we have very long tradition, diplomatic and political relations among or between our countries. So, but this period was very specific. It was divided into the two aspects: the relations of the Czechoslovakia to the Soviet Union, but specific part was independent political and economical cooperation with the China on the base of the pragmatic and progressive platform, which should pay impact on that issue. Very pragmatic issues were formed in this period. So the Czechoslovakia tried to promote own specific relations based on, let's say, the very well-known trademark as an economic platform for bilateral relations, that the Czechoslovakia was used as a very good trademark for a developing Chinese industry, as a, let's say, the industrial inspiration from many specific routes of the industry. But we should speak more about the transformation processes. When the Czechoslovakia the regime was changed in the 19th, these relations on this diplomatic platform were very progressive. They have not such an impact to the mutual diplomatic relations. The Czechoslovakia was very respectful to the internal, let's say, the internal aspects of the internal policy of the China. But specific issue was, I'm sorry, that's true. The specific issue was the split of the Czechoslovakia. We know that China has a very, let's say, a very specific approach to the self-proclamation or disruption of the state sovereignty aspects, the focus of these issues. But the split of the Czechoslovakia was provided by the legal and constitutional platform very peacefully, and this process was respected also by the powers very fluently, and also China declared very fast the continue of our diplomatic cooperation for the future. But what should we say? The Slovak diplomacy and the position into the China was not dependent on the specific lines of the domestic policy. So it was not dependent on the issues what kind of the government is in the power in the Slovakia as well. So it was not dependent on the left or the right side or some nationalist camp. This was very strictly pragmatic. But let's say these issues or relations were developed only since the 2003 year, when the President Schuster was the first visitor of the China after, let's say, the 10 length of period of diplomatic relations. And this year was the something like a change point of the restoring mutual cooperation, and these relations became to be active more and more. So let's say the problems of the internal aspects of the state sovereignty, separatism, was not discussed from the bilateral side. This is very much important thing, that this kind of relations was very respectful. In 2009 year was the first visit of the Chinese president Hu Jintao. I'm sorry for the pronunciation of the Chinese president, but this visit of the Chinese President Hu was very symbolized that this was a very kind of success of the Slovak diplomacy, that because the repeat of the visit of the Chinese president was 2016 year. So this means that also the China puts an impact to the development of the developing the mutual relations in this way. So the long periodical policy from the Slovakia as a small country diplomacy to the China has no problems of these continual changes. This importance came into the practice when the Slovakia became a part of the members of the Security Council Assembly in the United Nations, where the relations of the China and Slovakia as a small country in the diplomacy was promoted very well, and it's prolonged to the future now. But the problematic points were not discussed. So the key topic is that the respect to the internal aspects of the internal policy of both countries. So there were no such a kinds of criticism of the both sides. The Slovakia is from the Central European countries has a specific position. When we compare Czech Republic and Poland in one or other side, which are very, let's say, the sometimes critical, and then we can see some lines of disruption of the forming the bilateral policy. The Slovakia still stays on a pragmatic form. So we can say that from the long period evaluation, our relations are very well. We can say that the theory that the great power as a China is and small state as a Slovakia, and the relations are developed on a, let's say, the smart or soft diplomacy issues. I would like to say one very good and positive example. Today, the Slovakia is one of the good example how the political relations and development could be very positive and usable for both sides. I think that the Slovakia and Slovak diplomacy, and this example is very good, that Slovakia is, I'm sorry, the China is promoted in the region through the Slovakian diplomacy as a serious good partner for investments, for industrial cooperation in high-tech technologies, let's say like an example of Huawei and others. But on the other side, also the Slovakia has a positive influence of the China, let's say in a cultural field of the diplomacy. And I would like to present and promote the importance of the establishing and functioning and also financing the Confucius Institute of Confucius, which are very active in Slovakia today. Today are acting the 16 institutes of Confucius, a great philosopher, that are very active in education field and education of the Chinese language for our students. I think that the mutual knowledge of each other as a great power on one side, and in another side, a very successful story of a small diplomacy country like Slovakia is very active also in the region of Central Europe and Western Balkan too, and also in a global position, is that the important is that the students and experts will be skilled in using the
Sorry, your voice is mute.
Yes, mute.
Oh, sorry. Now can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm speaking. Maybe some problem sketch. So then we can continue into the political from the cultural and the soft approach. because I don't see my own in the camera when I'm speaking. So
no problem. Yeah, you have 2 more minutes to conclude, please.
I would like to now to speak about the crisis and the development of the bilateral exchange of the economy. Today, when the platform 16 plus, the improvement of the economy balance with the budget with the China is developing, and the Slovak and Chinese relation are statistically one of the most developed investment and improvement today, and is one of the best examples of these 16 countries. So we should pay an impact not only to the quantity but also to the quality of the quality of the economy relations. And now let's a little bit look to the V4 platform, because it's also important, as I mentioned at the beginning of my speech, because I have so less time. I have a lot of things to talk, and it's a hurry. For the China, and also from the view of the V4, this region is very important. The China and V4 countries are organizing a lot of research projects, academic conferences, a very very huge context on the level of the diplomacy, but the China doesn't provide a specific platform of the policy of the V4. If we can evaluate the relation, the China is still going on a specific individual diplomatic approach to this V4 region country. So independent into the Slovakia, independent into the Czech Republic, Poland, and Hungary too. Now we can see that today from the region, this specific approach is mostly improved on the Chinese and Hungarian side. Today we can see it on a bilateral cooperation on the crisis management concerning to this contemporary pandemic situation. We know that also Hungary is one of the customers of the Chinese vaccine, and the Hungary today is one of the most populated and vaccinated country in Europe, so the Sinopharm and etc. So this is also very good example of the cooperation. So this is a specific platform. As I mentioned, also the Slovakia is a partner who has a specific approach. I think that contemporary Slovakia diplomacy position is that the Slovakia from the V4 countries fully respect the Chinese sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the importance of the development of the serious mutual relations today. But we still have a reserves for a mutual cooperation, and I think that not only this cultural and political side of the diplomacy is good level, only one good level, but we have also some from the SWOT analysis, and we can apply. We have also some very good opportunities for developing of mutual collaboration, also on the field of scientific research. Let's say we have a very good and very well developed medical research. For example, I can present here on this field that also the opportunity for our development is cooperation on, let's say, these medical programs. Slovakia was one of the first country which have investigated and promoted the PCR tests on the world. So also in a position of the vaccine on healthcare could be one good example for a mutual cooperation, for example.
We are running out of time, so
yeah. So I will conclude my speech today. Maybe I will written more in my article. I would like only to put impacts to the one conclusion. We should pay attention for a specific approach of the China as a great state, and the policy of the small state as something like a example of a success story. I think that the Slovakia could be usable as a successful story for this platform and for this discussion. And I would like to be very open for a discussion with the Chinese colleagues, how they will look at this kind of cooperation. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Just one small reminder. All our webinars is, as you can see, recorded, and it will be put on YouTube on our website as soon as we finish. Now, because we a little bit running out of time, I would like to give the floor to Professor Yang Na. Professor Yang Na, floor is yours, please. Do we have Professor? Professor Yang Na from... do we have Professor? No. Next on the list is Professor Kong Wen Wei. Professor Kong, are you there? Jian, do you see your colleagues? Unmute, Jian, unmute your microphone. Professor Jian Jambo from FUDAN.
Okay, sorry, Miss Yana cannot attend the meeting because she has some urgent business, private business to deal with today, so she cannot attend. Can we ask Professor Kong Fan Wei to make speech?
Exactly.
Okay.
Where is Professor Kong? Is he with us?
Yeah.
Floor is yours, sir. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very happy and honored to give a talk here. Thank you for your invitation. My topic is about EU foreign investment policy and its impact on China. I will give some points about the establishment of EU foreign investment policy and its changes, the cause of EU tightening scrutiny on FDI, and the expectation for its impact on Chinese cooperation from perspective of political risks. Also, I will talk about some points of my research. First of all, as we all know that the Lisbon Treaty gave the legal basis to EU FDI policy. As for its nature, we know that the EU FDI policy is part of EU trade policy. As for the policy area, it includes investment protection, market access, securing a level playing fields, dispute settlement mechanism, and so on. As we all know, at the very beginning, in the past, EU keep the door open, but now he changed its policy towards investment policy. The so-called four freedom of the EU are the four pillars to the European integration. One is the free movement of capital. As for the EU, no clear policy distinction towards internal and external capital in the past. But now we can say the EU is tightening scrutiny on FDI. For example, Germany, France, and Italy make a proposal to establish the EU-level playing fields in trade and investment towards European Commission. As we in 2018, the former president of European Commission, Jörg Juncker, have said that we are not naive free trade. We need scrutiny over purchase by foreign companies. As a result, we all know that in 2019, EU-level screening framework on FDI is established. Also, meanwhile, member states level FDI screening regimes are established or updated in some European countries. For example, France expands the list of sensitive sectors. Germany focuses on the critical infrastructure. Italy veto transaction in certain strategic sectors. Why these countries choose to tightening scrutiny on FDI? I think there are three reasons. First of all, some European countries follow what the US and other countries' action to strengthen FDI reviewing. Also, we all know that European Union have no function of FDI reviewing. The third reason is China factors, in my opinion. There are a very famous case in 2016, China Media Group acquired KUKA, a very famous robot company in Germany, valued at 4.5 million. And for the Germany or Europe, it's a bomb sale. Recent years, mushroom of Chinese investment in Europe, we can see that. For example, in 2019, China overall FDI flow to European Union reached 10.6 billion. It's about 7.8% of total flow according to Chinese information. Also, in 2019, add to the FDI outflow, we can see that China is the top 2 countries. The number 1 is Japan, the number 2 is China. Also, European Union is the largest, is the most important destination of Chinese FDI. Also, we can say that China FDI in the European Union further declined in 2016, according to some report. What's the reason why the Chinese FDI in Europe declined from 2017? In my opinion, some European countries worry about more and more Chinese FDI in European Union. We have 4 reasons. First of all, some European countries feel unfair about the relationship, feel unfair towards market exercise. They feel imbalanced and not reciprocal. Some European countries think that they open their market, but when they cannot get same treatment in China market. Also, another reason is market economy status. we all know that European Union did not recognize market economy features of China. They think the government gave some subsidies to Chinese companies, especially the state-owned enterprise. So the third reason is technology transfer. Chinese companies can get key technology and know-how by merger and acquisition with the investment in the European Union. They can succeed in competition with local government, local companies. Also, another reason is national security, because we know that China is not a European country's ally. When some Chinese company investment in some sectors, especially infrastructure, for example, energy, transport, and communication system, they worry about their national security. Also, we can see some cases of merger and acquisition failure of Chinese corporations in Europe. For example, China FUDAN grant chip investment fund have dropped it to take over bid for chip equipment market ICAN in 2016. Also, CNH Industrial end talk with China's FAW, a very famous vehicle production in China, on sales of EVIC unit in this year. My question is about how do political risks come into being when Chinese corporations invest in the European Union? We can analyze this problem from the perspective of political risks. As for the political risks, we can give its conception. It's variation of the international business environment result from political changes. This kind of changes is from the changes of government policy and have potential for significantly affecting the profit and other goals of some companies. Some research have made some conclusion about Chinese corporation political risks in European Union. They analyze this problem from the perspective of political, economic, and social dimension. Also, they think the relations with China have been set key factors to assess political risks. In terms of relations with China, they choose BIT, investment obstacle, bilateral political relationship, interdependence of trade and investment, as well as visa as the sub indicator. As for my own research, I want to analyze this problem from three aspects. First is the actor, second is the key factor, and another one is the influence path. In my opinion, political risks originate from the interplay among China, the EU, and the Chinese companies. Key factors lead to the political risks include China-EU relationship, characteristics and performance of Chinese companies. And another one is governance mechanism of the EU and its member states on FDI. As for influence path, economic relations, political setting, attention attracting, and mechanism triggering is the influence path. Also, my research include documentary analysis, Alice interview, and comparative methods. In conclusion, we can get some implication. For example, we need a new perspective from IPE. Traditionally, school analyze these issues from practical measurements or economic law. Also, the growth in China seizures in fields of international investment is a flexing of power transaction in international relations. Also, Chinese companies will properly be subject to great power competitions. Also, European have consensus on being not a naive free trader. What can we do in future? Thank you. That's all. Thank you. That's all. Thank you. Thank you. Chairman,
sorry,
thank you.
I have a technical problem to unmute my microphone. Thank you, Professor Kong Wenfei. I think now we have a chance for 2 comments as we agreed from the beginning. Is there any to raise the hands that would like to give the comments after 2 speech? If not, so our next on the list is Professor Jan Anthony, and Jan, floor is yours, sir. Please, Jan, unmute the microphone. Yes.
Thank you. So thank you for the opportunity to join this meeting. What I wanted to do was to say a few words about a project which has recently concluded at SIPRI as part of a longer chain of projects we've had looking at the Belt and Road Initiative over a number of years. And this project was looking specifically at Europe. The project was based on quite an extensive series of interviews that we carried out with experts in Europe and in China, as well as 2 workshops, one of which was held physically, and the other one was a virtual workshop because of the limitations of the pandemic. And the project team is both Chinese and European. This is a joint project between my program on European security and SIPRI's program on China and global security. And I think that's an important method to continue using in the future. That what we produced was a joint text with both Chinese and European inputs, rather than a Chinese perspective followed by a European perspective. So we'll try and maintain that method. Now, investment in the projects that are now labeled as connectivity in Europe actually stretches back several decades. And in the beginning, these projects had a commercial logic. And we wanted to see how those projects, which were initiated with a commercial logic, were progressing given the shifting geopolitical conditions. And we chose to focus on transportation and digital, partly because those are projects which require significant investment, and they often involve complex engineering. And so ideally, they would fit within long-term partnerships expected to last 4 or 5 decades, because that's the lifespan of some of these major infrastructure projects. But in fact, political relations can be much more volatile than that. So political relations can change in a much shorter period. Sometimes they can change very quickly. And the context for that was our feeling that the China-EU relationship overall is long-term. It has to be something which can survive ups and downs in political relations, because this is one of the key relationships which is going to structure the international system over the coming decades. And when you start to look at the projects that we examined, you can see that in fact they have delivered very real benefits. And those benefits are beginning to flow both ways. That means both through the maritime routes and also through the rail connections. And it happened after the end of most of our work, but if you think about what happened recently with the blockage of the Suez Canal and the impact that had on global transport and supply chains, it's certainly very rational to have multiple corridors of communication available. But these projects are no longer, it's clear these projects are no longer seen as politically neutral. and they're no longer seen as things which can be managed through technical discussions at the level of officials. They're now embedded in a discussion which is taking place at the highest political level. And connectivity projects are being examined in the context of wider assessments, both in China about Europe, and perhaps particularly whether the shift in European thinking that we've seen in the last few years could be part of building a sort of emerging anti-China coalition on a global basis. And in Europe, I think the thinking has been heavily influenced by some factors which are not even China specific. They're related to the security shocks we've experienced in Europe in the last almost a decade. The strategic shock of what happened in Crimea and Ukraine, when Russia crossed the most important red line in the European security system by changing a border using military force, which is absolutely excluded by the agreements we reached in the 90s, in fact, stretching all the way back to the Helsinki Agreement. And a recognition that we have in Europe a kind of structural vulnerability, which is created by the opening of our societies, which creates multiple surfaces, if you like, where malicious actors can carry out actions that have an impact across the wider Europe. So in developing systems to combat the consequences of these strategic shocks, we see things happening which have a direct impact on the connectivity projects that involve China. So the fact that conflict in Europe is now a planning assumption for most states, which is a Russia issue rather than a China issue. It doesn't mean that a conflict with Russia is predicted or expected, but it's certainly not excluded. And as a result of that, there has been a shift of thinking about the need to invest more in defense and also to create the systems for military mobility that would allow the rapid movement of people and equipment, both from the United States into Europe and within Europe. And that means transportation infrastructure now has not just the aspect of how do we move civilian goods quickly and cheaply, but it has this strategic dimension, which is a part of planning. And that is something which is reflected in the closer relationship between the European Union and NATO, where many of NATO's military mobility requirements are now incorporated into Commission thinking about transport networks. It also extends to the issue of critical infrastructure protection, both the digital network and also the information that it contains, and the building of a European cybersecurity system, as well as an important transatlantic discussion on digital and cybersecurity, where reducing Chinese involvement in specific projects has produced results. We can see that reflected in decisions that have been taken in the last few years to exclude Chinese companies from projects involved in digital technology. So this changing security environment has begun to have an important effect on projects which involve China-Europe cooperation. You can also see it in some of the things which have been referred to, so there's no need to spend a great deal of time on them, but the beginning of a legislative framework for scrutiny of infrastructure projects against security criteria is a new development. That's something which is implemented at a national level within a European framework or an EU framework. But we can see some characteristics emerging in the European national frameworks. One is that decisions are now submitted to the security services and to the armed forces before a decision is taken about whether or not to approve a significant infrastructure project. Previously, the factors that would have been taken into account would have reflected the impact on monopolies or market concentration. But now the security services and armed forces are asked for an opinion, and that opinion is a factor in decision making. Secondly, on the issue of embedding this, if you like, in a larger framework of regulation, as has already been pointed out, there are very important things happening in the area of investment industrial policy, which will have an indirect impact on feasibility of infrastructure projects. How is this changing? And it is continuously changing in ways that affect the China-EU cooperation. Well, one is, of course, that the very rapid agreement on a huge recovery fund post-pandemic is yet to play out in terms of what it means on the ground. But certainly one possibility is that it will reduce the need for Chinese financing for major infrastructure projects. That a significant part of the recovery fund will be channeled into major infrastructure projects at a national level. Secondly is that other issues have moved higher up the political agenda, as has already been pointed out. Questions related to energy transition, climate-related topics, public health are now moving, if you like, closer to the center of the China-EU conversation. And thirdly, there are some important geopolitical processes as well as some technical processes which will have an impact. The discussions over the investment agreement will be one focal point, and one that creates a certain metric, if you like, for seeing how successfully China and the EU can develop their bilateral relations, including in areas that affect connectivity. And secondly, we're expecting in June NATO to initiate the development of a new strategic concept. And it's already clear that one of the things in that strategic concept will have to be some common language on how the transatlantic community approaches its relationship with China. So these are factors which will obviously in the coming 2 to 3 years help to shape the near-term progress in China-EU relations. Some final observations. I think we have to accept that for the foreseeable future, the China-EU relationship is not going to be an easy one. There are a significant number of things that we disagree about, and we have to find mechanisms for managing those disagreements. In specific terms around connectivity projects, there's no support that we found in Europe for so-called decoupling. There is no real interest in trying to separate what are seen as integrated systems in supply chains or even in digital connectivity. What you see instead is a need to establish what it means to be a trusted and reliable partner. Most of the legislation which I referred to before is not targeted at any specific country. It makes reference to limiting cooperation to safe and reliable partners. But we don't yet have clarity about what are the characteristics of a safe and reliable partner. Secondly, it would be very logical to focus on supply chain security issues as a way of tackling this issue of safe and secure partnership. And in this way, it should be able to identify projects that can survive the sort of political volatility, which I think we have to expect in the relationship in the coming years. So I think bringing clarity to wider aims and objectives can only really be built on people-to-people contacts, which is actually one part of Europe's connectivity agenda. And I think one of the things that we found in our project is that there's a very significant gap in European knowledge about China, and perhaps also in Chinese knowledge about the European Union, which needs to be filled. We have far fewer resources and far fewer people devoted to analysis of China if you compare it, for example, with Russia. So I think the kinds of collaboration that this meeting is built on are the sorts of things that we need to be promoting and expanding at scale in the coming decade. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan, so much. I have same situation here in Serbia. I am in China since 2006. I was engaged in Olympic Games security, and suddenly, last 2-3 years, we have in Serbia, for example, many experts on China. And I can tell you out of my experience that I know China something that basically for myself that I don't know China yet. And who said in my country that it's expert on China, I very doubt in that. So most of the, let's say, problem between people, between countries occur because of the lack of the knowledge between each other, lack of introductions. That's why we actually start with this webinar. And maybe there is someone else, somebody else is doing the same efforts as we, but we will continue. And after next speaker is Professor Chang Jiadong. If he is not present, I learned that his presentation will be done by Miss Wei Han. So Miss Wei Han, good morning, good afternoon, actually your time. Please unmute the microphone and unmute your microphone, and floor is yours, but you need to first unmute microphone. Darko from Technical Assistance, can you unmute directly? Just hold on. Darko Bradovic, please unmute Han Wei microphone. Han Wei, you have the gumb at your screen and it's a microphone, just unmute. No way, just let's see. Darko, možemo li da je odmutim? Han Wei. Yes, Han.
I have unmuted myself. Okay. Good afternoon. It's afternoon right now in Beijing. I will share Professor Zhang Jiadong's thoughts on his topic on behalf of him. Can I share my screen with you, because I don't have the authority to share my screen. I have a PowerPoint to share all of you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now we'll see. From our technical point, you. Mm-hmm.
I can't share it by myself. Maybe there's the.
Is there any way that you can put your gum in front of you? It's open for try to put your.
Oh yeah, now it's open.
Okay.
Okay. Dear professors, I'm a PhD candidate under the supervision of Professor Jiadong. He can't deliver a speech in person due to his time problem. So I would like to take his place and share with you his understanding of China-EU counterterrorism cooperation. The topic of the speech is international terrorist threat and China-EU cooperation. It will consist of the following parts. First, we will have a look at threat international terrorism. Second, we will examine China-EU cooperation in counterterrorism. Third, I will show you some thoughts of Professor Jiadong about the prospects of China-EU cooperation in counterterrorism. In the first part, the threat of international terrorism, we will look at recent trends in terrorism, mainly in the scope of the world and Europe. Currently, there are four major characteristics in international terrorism. First, the impact of terrorism has been declined. Through the chart, we can see the deaths caused by terrorism has been decreased. The past 5 years saw the end of the surge in terrorism across the globe, with deaths from terrorism declining every year since 2014, falling by 59% in total. The total number of deaths from terrorism declined for the fifth consecutive year in 2019, falling by 15%. Second, South Asia, Middle East, and Africa are among the regions with the most severe terrorism in the world. Although the situation of Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India in South Asia has improved, the region is still the most active region for global terrorist activities in 2019. It is also the second year in a row that South Asia has suffered more deaths due to terrorism than any other region in the world. In addition, the expansion of IS into sub-Saharan Africa has led to a surge in terrorist activity in many countries in the region. Third, the West is faced with a surge in far-right terrorism, while the absolute number of far-right attacks remains low compared with other forms of terrorism. Since 2014, in Western countries such as North America, Western Europe, and Oceania, there has been a 250% increase in far-right attacks and a 709% increase in deaths. In each of the past 5 years, there have been more than 35 incidents of far-right terrorism in Western countries. First, terrorists have used advanced technology to enhance the destructiveness of terrorism. Terrorist organizations are beginning to use artificial intelligence to carry out terrorist attacks. There are several ways. First, they use drones to launch terrorist attacks. Second, they use AI to gather intelligence. And third, they use artificial intelligence for cyber attacks and propaganda. Terrorist organizations are likely to further utilize the technical features of AI to expand their scope of operations and even innovate forms of terrorism. Second, let's switch our attention to the main threats in China and Europe. Along with the development of global terrorism, the terrorism in Europe and China presents some common features. First, religious extremism is more rampant. Religious extremism is a major source of terrorist threats in both China and Europe. Taking the terrorist attack on the Jewish school in Toulouse, France in 2020 as a boundary, the previous terrorist attacks in Europe were mostly carried out by Al-Qaeda, while the later terrorist attacks were mostly carried out by Islamic State, both of which belong to Islamic extremist terrorism. Second, cyber terrorism is a new form of terrorism in China and Europe simultaneously. The internet and social media are widely used by international terrorist organizations. At one point in 2014, the IS group controlled at least 46,000 Twitter accounts, possibly as many as 90,000 with large online followers. In terrorist attacks in Europe, terrorists are no longer limited to traditional tools such as controlled knives, light guns, human bombs, and military explosives, but pay attention to high-tech products such as unmanned aerial vehicles, internet, social media, and mobile applications. The combination of old and new tools has promoted the change of terrorist attacks means. In the second part, we will look at the current state of China-EU counterterrorism cooperation. In terms of the China-EU cooperation in counterterrorism, we should examine it in a developed angle. In the past, it has been difficult for China and EU to cooperate on counterterrorism. Some branches of anti-China terrorist organizations in Europe do not engage in terrorist activities in Europe. Most of them engage in propaganda and political activities and do not directly endanger the security of European countries. This made cooperation between China and European countries, including Germany, difficult for a long time. In May 2005, during State Councilor and Minister of Public Security Zhou Yongkang's visit to Germany, he made a special trip to Munich in an attempt to cooperate with the Internal Ministry of German State of Bavaria in cracking down on the East Turkestan organization in Munich, but the Germans refused. However, with the growing threat of terrorism facing European countries, especially from religious extremism, cooperation between China and Europe in anti-terrorism is becoming possible. Second, as for the major areas of cooperation between China and EU in combating terrorism, there are three aspects we can delve into in the future. The first is intelligence sharing. This involves the identity of some terrorist suspects. their movements, and so on. Since 2015, there has been increased sharing of counterterrorism information between different law enforcement agencies in the EU, but it has yet to be achieved on a constant basis. China and EU have been busy going through their domestic legislative procedures over a strategic agreement reached by China's Ministry of Public Security and the European Police Office recently. Second, religious knowledge sharing. China has been localizing religious knowledge and personnel for a long time. Now, some European countries are moving in the same direction. Germany's Federal Internal Ministry, for example, announced two developments have been made in recent years. The first is a nationwide demonstration project starting in 2020 to train clerics in the Islamic community in German. The second is a Turkish Union of Islamic Religious Institutions, Germany's largest Islamic body, which began training his own clerics in German in January, replacing those sent by Turkey. In this respect, there is room for cooperation between China and the European countries. Third, cooperation on cyber counterterrorism. China and the EU share great common interests in combating cyber terrorists. China has always been an active participant and contributor in international cooperation against cyber terrorism. In 2015, China encouraged the Shanghai Cooperation Organization to hold its first cyber counterterrorism practice in Xiamen and successfully held two international seminars on combating cyber terrorism in Beijing under the framework of the Global Counterterrorism Forum. Europe is also doing a lot. France has established anti-terrorist network forces, introduced the new counter-terrorist law. The UK has also set up the Counter-Terrorism Online Protection Unit and the Facebook Force. Germany has set up a cyber patrolman system and the Office for the Security Field Information Center to develop technical solutions and strategies to combat cyber terrorism. Finally, Professor Zhao Dong has some thoughts on this topic. First, how should we balance the cognitive differences between China and Europe regarding the relationship between anti-separatism and anti-terrorism? The Chinese people believe that reunification is the highest goal of a country and that anti-separatism is more important than anti-terrorism. So they often associate ethnic separatism with religious extremism and terrorism as the three forces that threaten China's security and stability. But for Europeans, ethnic separatism is a different concept, and they suspect that China is attacking minority autonomy by combating terrorism. Therefore, how to balance the differences of understanding between China and Europe on the issue of national unity is an important prerequisite for the establishment of more stable China-EU cooperation in counterterrorism. Second, how should we prevent the abuse of human rights and the concept of democracy by religious extremists and terrorist groups? Some anti-China terrorist organizations disguised as human rights organizations, independent organizations, and political organizations often use concepts such as human rights, autonomy, and democracy to confuse European public opinion and play games with China. As a result, some of China's anti-terrorist measures will be associated with the image of being undemocratic and not respecting human rights. Therefore, it is also an important issue for China and the EU to communicate their views on these concepts and to avoid the interference of such differences in understanding in counter-terrorist cooperation. That's the end of the speech. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. I think Professor Zhao Dong shall to be proud to have students like you, and we are wishing you the best in your master degree, actually PhD. I'm sorry, PhD at FUDAN. And now we have a time if there is 2 comments after 2 speakers. Is there any comments, please? If there is, please raise the hand or just unmute the microphone. One question from Milan Kuzmanovic. Milan, unmute the microphone. Milan used to be the student at FUDAN University. So Milan, floor is yours.
Thanks. I was actually a student at Shanghai Jiao Tong University.
Jiao Tong, sorry.
Yeah, but so as I figured, we were talking about a cross section between economy and security issues. So I would like to ask Professor Ian Anthony, what does he think is the red line for European Union in regards to China? And as we just heard from Ms. Han Wei, the red line for China, I guess, is the support for any kind of or any form of separatism. So that is the clear red line that we often hear from the authorities in Beijing, whether it's the issues regarding Xinjiang or Hong Kong or Taiwan. All of those issues are concerned in China as national issues and interests. So we are pretty much sure what the red line is in China, but somehow we do not have, as you suggested, a coherent strategy about what is the core red line for European Union in regards to China.
Okay, thank you, Milan. Any more comments? If no, next our speaker is Professor Alberto Testa. Professor Testa, floor is yours. Please, sir.
Hi, okay. I will try.
Can you put the image? Also, we don't see you.
Okay, sorry. Well, I will try to use the PowerPoint. So let's see if I'm able to do that. So share screen and desktop, perhaps. Advanced file. Well, I'm not very sure how to do it. Let me see. Okay. Doesn't work. Yes. Okay. Okay. Is he on? Can you see my PowerPoint?
It is, yeah, try again to share. Try again.
Let me see the security. Just sorry, this computer, they all have a lot of security. Sometimes it's a pain. Let me see. Sorry.
Just.
Okay, and now it should be like this. Okay. I will try now again. Share. Yes.
You have down button for share, yes?
And then share.
Good. Yes.
Does it work?
Yes, yes.
Well, incredible technology. Okay, so I do the slideshow probably. We start in this way, like usually we do. Play from the start. Okay, so well, first of all, I would like to thank you for this opportunity. It's very interesting webinar, Darko and the colleague at FUDAN University. Mine is just a reflection. It does not have any kind of things to see that is a new stuff or anything. It's just a reflection on my interest. I'm working on terrorism and collaborating also with the security agencies, but also I also have an interest, a minor interest in organized crime. So I thought to have some kind of reflection of these two topics in relation with in relation with the EU and China, their relationship. So China has overtook the United States to become a European Union largest trading partner. China and the EU are gradually working together in a different range of policy area. And even during this pandemic, we've seen this collaboration, which is quite good, especially when two powers dialogue and try to cooperate. Well, that said, the link between these two powers cannot totally, I would say, conceal significant difficulties and fueled by mutual suspicion and rivalry. And a very good, actually, example to show this dynamic at play is if we consider two important global threats that actually are also linked to each other in some way, which is the organized crime and the terrorist threat. So let's see a little bit the organized crime. Well, China has a long history of organized crime in the form of the triads. The triads have historical roots in the secret society and trade associations organized to protect territory, business, and sometimes illicit activity. I was very interested in the history of the triads because in some way remind me the way of the origin of one of the Italian mafia group, which is from Naples, Camorra, and that they share some kind of similarity in their origin. Well, Chinese organized crime is one of the biggest organized crime group in the world, and has become much more global in recent years, and of course has become a threat, a severe threat within the EU. I am Italian, I have dual nationality, Italian and English. From the Italian side, the Chinese organized crime has been operating in Italy since the 1990s and smuggling people and trafficking drugs. But the Italian police has struggled to investigate them because of a similar way of how the Sicilian mafia operated with the concept of omertà, so a very big wall of silence, which is very difficult to break. Well, I made an example here. Well, in 2013, there was a raid in Prato, which hosted one of the largest Chinese community, and they was a raid on a club, and in this club was a den of drugs, illegal gambling, and prostitution. And while the club was owned by an Italian, the police then uncovered that the real owners were associates of a crime boss, nicknamed as a Black Man, and was a Chinese origin, and he was actually treated, the police commented on that, treated like a god, had a godlike status in the Chinese underworld. And in Italy and in the EU, the triads have several criminal enterprises, where we have drug trafficking, extortion and protections rackets, the production of fake goods, and also recently I was involved in a research a few years ago, and they also have the racket of steroids and the human growth hormone, which they supply in gyms around Europe. There is a modern slavery there going on, and in cooperation with other organized crime, in Italy with the Camorra. The Chinese, if I remember well, in 2014, they have toughened up their measure to freeze suspicious assets that also target foreign associates of these criminal groups, and also terrorists, and to report activity of people thought of being related to this group and crime. So the EU, what are the challenges? Well, the EU has all the interest to dialogue, to work with China, to try to stop these activities. However, the major problem here is extradition. Well, extradition is the EU is reluctant to extradite individuals to China because of China use of death penalty and allegedly use of torture in prisons. Of course, China rejected this claim from for the European Union. Well, China also do not extradite its citizens abroad. So we already have a big obstacle to a dialogue on this topic. And there is also a problem of counterfeiting goods, product of fake goods, which are managed by Chinese organized crime, and which are damaging a lot of firms that work in Europe. Well, I think 1 month ago, I saw an Omega watch that was incredibly similar to mine. And the only differences was that you needed to open up the watch to see the difference of mechanism. Otherwise, it was completely similar. And in this regard, China seems a little bit more tolerant of fake products because probably these are they produce jobs, and of course it could be a bit of a problem. This is for the organized crime. From a terrorist point of view, we have the main perceived terrorist threat in China, which relates to the separatist, sorry if I pronounce very badly, but Uyghurs. And they are basically 12 million, mostly Muslim, which do not identify with the Chinese majority. They speak their own language, similar to Turkish, and recent decades have had a very big influx of the Chinese ethnic majority into their territory. And of course, a lot of tensions that have been created, and violent actions, terrorist actions have originated from that. And again, this situation once again creates a division between China and the EU. Well, several EU countries, including the United States, have accused China of committing genocide against this group. And well, there have been several reports about the sterilization of women, member of this ethnic community. And recently, very recently, in March 2021, the US government has a sanction to Chinese government officials who were accused to violate human rights. And immediately after, the European Union did the same and also involve other individuals. Well, the Chinese authority claimed and that the Uyghurs have trained in Afghanistan and they are involved in the global jihad. And there is some support on this because in 2017, the Syrian ambassador to China reported that 5,000 Uyghurs were fighting in Syria, and many were ISIS members. So what are the challenges here and the commonality with Europe? Well, Europe and China have the same problem in foreign fighters when they come back home, and they can be a danger to national security. So there is a scope for dialogue and there is a scope for intelligence sharing. However, we have two different here approach to extremism between China and the EU again. The EU use a mix of repression, surveillance, but also of dialogue with moderate Muslim leader to try to avoid many young to get captured from extremism and be radicalized. On the other side, though, on China, the approach seems much more repressive, and there is not kind of that interdialogue, interfaith dialogue that is going on in EU. And in my opinion, these actually backfire, because if you repress, and there are different accounts about repression there, I do not want even to list them, but if you repress hardly, then psychologically you actually reinforce the identity of those individuals and create more radicalization and more extremism. So you basically harden the Uyghur identity instead of weaken it. So in summary, well, the main security threat of the 21st century, in my opinion, it doesn't come from other states, but come actually from civilian groups, which either play identity or religious politics and extremism, but also groups that are just only organized crime groups that have been just recognized that are a global threat. And I think that there is a scope for cooperations between China and the EU in both fronts. In relation to organized crime, I think that the most effective, the most active criminal activity of Chinese gangs in Europe, which is the production of fake goods, but also drug trafficking, cybercrime, illegal money laundering activities. I think that these can be contained if the EU and China start to reflect and start to adopt similar legislation and creating a very solid monitoring system. Is in the interest of both parties. Is interested in the EU because, of course, these activities are actually a threat for financial threat for many companies in the EU and so on. But it's also for China because we have seen during the pandemic how the effort of China to keep a good image abroad and at the global level, so it could be good to collaborate with the EU to try to stamp out this type of activity. In relation to terrorism, well, again, the EU and China have a common interest, is the foreign fighter that coming back in their own respective country, and then they pose a threat to public. Well, these can be just only resolved if they start to collaborate much more, in particular intelligence sharing and also in weapon export and control. So I hope, though, that the mutual economic and trade interest and also a renewed collaboration during this pandemic can in the future work as an impulse for China and Europe to sit down and to start to speak much more pragmatically of how can they solve their security threat, which they think have in common. Thank you.
Thank you, Alberto. Very inspirative presentation. And I hope there is one more person carefully following your presentation, and we know who. So best regards to your fiancé. Next on the line, it's Professor Zhang Yi, but Zhang Yi is just temporarily absent. It will come back. And I would like to call Professor Song Li Lei.
Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Okay. Dear Chairman,
yes, we hear you, but we don't
please
see.
let me introduce myself. I come from Tsinghua University as a Vice Deputy for European Studies here, and I have cooperated with my master student, Bian Sai, because her master thesis is about European public diplomacies and how the China and the EU promote their cooperations for the public health organization. In this institution's construction is one of his concerns. I will invite Ms. Bian Sai to talk first, and she will be responsible for first and second parts of my PowerPoint, and then I will talk about the situation and the further progress under the this pandemic year, please. Okay, thank you, Professor Song. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, please. What is yours?
Okay. As written here, the topic of our speech is progress and challenges of China-EU public health cooperation. Public health as a growing issue in China-EU relations has gradually become a major issue of the two levels of cooperation. Regarding China-EU health cooperation, we will start from the following 5 aspects. The first is the historical process of the China-EU health cooperation. The second.
We don't hear you. We don't hear you, so can you unmute your microphone? Hello, Miss.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, now you are with us. Continue.
I'm sorry about that.
No problem.
I will. The first is the historical process. We're going to talk about the China-EU health cooperation, and the second is the cooperation mechanism. The third is China-EU health under the coronavirus. And the first part, we will talk about the challenges and opportunities of the China-EU public health cooperation. And in the end, we will summarize and give our conclusion on this issue. As major participants in global health governance, China and the EU has always played an important role in cooperation. Next, I will sort out the historical process of China-EU health cooperation at the multilateral and bilateral levels. So as we all know, on Friday, May 12, 1972, the 25th World Health Assembly passed a resolution to restore China's legal status in the World Health Organization. Since then, China has participated in every WHO's World Health Assembly and the regional committee meeting as a member country. In October 1978, the Memorandum of the Technical Cooperation between the People's Republic of China and the World Health Organization was signed in Beijing, which was a milestone in China's initiation of multilateral health cooperation. As for the progress of EU, the famous WHO Regional Office for European established, in 1992, and later in the first health strategy agreed by the European Union in 2007. So the European Commission called for strengthening the EU's voice in the field of global health with the establishment and the development of the WHO Regional Office for Europe as the evidence. In the multilateral cooperation under the WHO, the most typical case of China-EU health cooperation is the cooperation on poliovirus, commonly we know as the polio. With the advice and support of the WHO, the EU has cooperated with the National Health Commission of the People's Republic of China, and it conducted 2 rounds of polio immunization campaigns targeting 3.8 million Chinese children under 15 years old. So this immunization campaign has, of course, a positive impact. Next, I will go to the bilateral level. Since China and EU established a bilateral diplomatic relationship in 1975, economic and trade, instead of health affairs, had remained the foremost concern for the two sides in China-EU relations in the early years. Until 1995, the EU released its first policy paper on China, a long-term policy for China-Europe relations. It should be seen as the signal that health has raised the attention of European policymakers. which was the first step of China-EU public health cooperation. From 1994 to 2001, the EU has provided a total of 4.5 million euros in funding for China's AIDS prevention work. And in 1998, China and the EU established China-EU Summit and released the China-EU Joint Press Communique. So with the help of this institution, China and Europe leaders were able to discuss the issue they're most concerned about and the direction for future cooperation. However, health issues still went missing in the first 5 summits and were only listed as an interesting sector for future dialogue in their meeting. The case was also true for the EU second policy paper on China as published in 2001, where no emphasis was given to health cooperation. The turning point of China-European health cooperation was the SARS. As we all know, it broke out in 2003 and served as a watershed of China-EU health cooperation. China and the EU recognized the importance of strengthening cooperation to combat like HIV, AIDS, as well as other newly emerging infectious disease in face of the pandemic. So during the visit of Mr. Andrula Vassiliou, the EU Commissioner for Health, to Beijing in 2009, she met Mr. Chen Zhu, Chinese Minister of Health, and the two sides agreed to start a dialogue on health policy. This mechanism aims to strengthen the public health security of the two sides, as well as the capability to safeguard the health of humankind. 5 areas were emphasized, including, like I written here, infectious disease and other health threats, non-infectious disease, preventive medicine, food safety, and international health. So at the 16th annual summit held in 2012, China and the EU jointly adopted the EU-China 2020 strategic agenda for cooperation, which planted for their cooperation in the next 7 years. So in conclusion, we can see that in the first few years of China-EU relations, health was not a key issue that was discussed and paid attention to by both sides. As health crisis becoming increasingly obvious, public health security has become an important area of health governance and promoting health diplomacy in the countries, regions, and world. That's my part. The second part and beyond, please welcome Professor Song.
We share one PowerPoint because we are in one small meeting room. Thank you for listening. Welcome your suggestion and interest. And it is known to all that since the outbreak of the pandemic, China and the European Union, they have maintained their close.
Professor Song, sorry, we don't hear you well. Can you put microphone closer, please? Thank you.
Hello, here?
Yeah,
yes.
No problem to hear you well. So just if you can place microphone closer to you.
I have closed. Let's see.
We hear you from distance. So if you can come closer to microphone, please.
Okay, it is known to all that when the outbreak of this pandemic, China and the European Union have maintained close ties. And when China was in the most difficult time in the early of last spring, the European Union officials on these levels, they have cooperated with its member states. They have aided China with more than 50 tons of productive materials. And for example, the Italian government organized a special plane to transport these medicine supplies to China. And also, President from the Italian side, they have held special concert to support the Chinese people in fighting about the pandemic. One of the famous local brand from Poland, they also send their best wishes to Chinese societies. And our leaders, such as President Xi Jinping and Premier Li Qiang, they have sent their condolence cards to the leaders of the European Union and the European countries, such as France and Germany, to express Chinese support for France after April in last year. And here I have some small cases. First, the China and the EU, they have conducted these multiple online meetings to exchange information and share experience on the pandemic prevention and control this pandemic. Such as one of the Chinese academics from the of engineer Zhong Nanshan, he himself have many times online meetings with the head of the European side to introduce Chinese achievements and appearance. And for another point, China has sent numerous teams of the medicine expert to Europe. The first Chinese government sent this team for the medical experts to Italy, and it happened in March. In a third point, for example, China has cooperated close with European companies for this vaccine research and development. Here I have cited one from Germany and another from UK, this medicine group. It is known that there are also many challenges and opportunities for the China public health corporations. We also cited some points. First, it is to mention that the China and the EU side, they have changed from the cooperation as aid and donator relations. And the China and the EU health relationship, they have changed to another equal partnership. And both sides should rebalance and rethinking how to be the partnership for the global governance and even corporations for public health areas. And the second, we should mention in the bilateral field, China and the EU, they still have many strengths for corporations. Here I have mentioned some common challenges. The population aging issues, the major diseases preventions, and medical system reforming. And from China and the EU side, both have the willingness to help the less developed areas. For example, how to cooperate and find solutions for third-party ways to help the Latin America and African continents. They need to have the more wisdoms. We should not avoid, they have many challenges. Here I have talked about 3 points. For example, the public health governance lacks global agreed standards. It is known that the EU has passed their green passport, and in this green passport, they don't include the Chinese vaccines inside. Even from the WHO levels, it's permitted to use as emergency situations. So consider after this pandemic, how to beneficial each other for the travels and for the economic cooperations. We need to think about global standards to guarantee each other is safe and healthy. In the conclusion levels, we have mentioned such as the Chinese President Xi Jinping himself has insisted this community with shared future of human health. And China and EU health cooperations is transforming, and it need to think about the futures. And the China side, they have proposed the idea of establish this health Belt and Road Initiative. For the future, this Euro-Asia Connective to promote health cooperation is one important point. And for our research, we will consider the further challenges. All these questions is needed the wisdoms from the colleagues and the academic levels. That's all. Thank you for your questions.
Not reader. Can I do that?
Hello?
Yes, we finish our praise now. I think if you have any questions, we will glad to talk and from the Q&A round.
So, is that all? Are you finished? Or?
Yes, we have finished our PowerPoint. Yes, and jumping our conclusions and given some further discussion areas. Sorry, maybe we are very quick. Your Chinese side is already in the evening for the dinner time.
Okay, good. So thank you so much, Professor Song. You and your master degree student be on site. And as it's good custom, now we have a chance for two comments.
Please.
Is there any comments? Okay, so we can oh, Professor Xumenchi, floor is yours, Professor. Unmute the microphone, Professor. Xumenchi, unmute the microphone, please.
Yes. I have a very short comment on a book. Oh, no, sorry. Abe Testa.
Yeah, please.
Yes. He mentioned these cooperation against organized crime and terrorism. I mentioned the different, kind of method and way to deal with these, crimes in Europe and China. Yes, I think because the legal background and cultural background is different, I think that the way to deal with them is different. However, I think he also believed that these differences should not, prevent or check the cooperation between two sides. I think within the territory, I think the authority of its own have the way to deal with these crimes, whether it's a more dialogue way or suppressed way. I think to European, Chinese ways to deal all these crimes, it's a little bit more suppressed. However, we believe this is more effective. I think within the territory, this is not a big problem. However, if it comes to the international arena, I think that dialogue and cooperation and information sharing, and sometimes, I think the experience mutually, exchange to more effective way to deal these crimes and terrorism. I think it's important for both sides. So I hope that this difference should not have negative impact on the cooperation in this regard. And it is not yet time for the both sides to criticize the other side for the way to, against these to deal with these organized crimes and terrorism attacks. I think that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. One more comment, or we shall give floor to Professor Testa to respond. We need your picture. Join us with yourself. Alberto? Are you there, Alberto?
Okay, yeah. Well, I've a problem. Unfortunately, my computer just collapsed. So I do not have the video, so I apologize for this. Well, my presentation was not to criticize China. I didn't have a lot of time also to speak about. Well, I come from a country where I have a dual nationalities, and whatever country I go, I find still organized crime in each country and still instances of terrorist group in each country. The only thing is I am an applied criminology, so I do theory, but I'm more interested in being pragmatic, and probably I think the collaboration between China and the EU must also be based on some kind of common values and common way of dealing. I think that there is a lot of scope for dialogue, especially now with the pandemic that has created a bit of a collaborations between China and Europe. But still, however, there are differences. There are differences in how, for instance, we identify terrorists. Well, in China, the Uyghur are identified as terrorists, while in the EU are more identified as some kind of resistance type of group, not so much terrorists. It's a difficult thing. So mine was not a any kind of groundbreaking presentation, just only that there is a scope for both powers to collaborate. But what they need to do is they need to overcome that kind of suspicion and on both sides, and they start to cooperate a little bit better. I believe that, for instance, a more forceful intervention of China to stamp out counterfeiting goods, which is a nightmare in the EU. Perhaps it would be also good for a global image of China. And I spoke with few of my EU colleagues, and they say that there is not so much willing to do so because of economic kind of implication. But anyway, that was my thing. It was not an accuse to or a criticism to China. It was just only trying to
just criticism. Nobody do not understand this
yeah.
as any accusation. So thank you so much. Next on our list is Professor Vasko Stamerski, former Brigadier General of Macedonian SWAT and Vice Rector of Slavic University. So Professor Stamerski, floor is yours, Vasko.
Good afternoon to all. I am happy to be in this interesting event. And I will try to make sure review the relationship between Macedonia and European Union on the one hand and China on the other. In that direction, I will talk individually about those relations and what is the position of Macedonia. Namely, Macedonia and the Republic of China have mutual relations that are developing in the spirit of friendship, mutual understanding, and mutual respect for the sovereignty, territorial integrity, equality of both countries. From the establishment on the diplomatic relation in 1993 to the present, China is one of the main supporters of our independence and identity. So today, along with 50 countries from Europe, is part of a larger Chinese strategy toward this region, implemented through the initiative 16+1. I can be emphasized that we have many opportunity for financing projects that will contribute to greater economic development. One of them is the construction of highway in Macedonia that are built with Chinese forever loans. Macedonia has huge potential for establishing more intensive cooperation with the Chinese economy. And besides the infrastructure possibility, there are opportunity in the field of tourism, food industry, education, science, etc. At the moment, the infrastructure investment are there more visible, which is one of the most important priority and goals for future greater cooperation with China. There is great contribution from China, but there is always the possibility of having individual business relation with the companies from China, together with Macedonian company. Will enter the EU market, and Macedonian products will find the right place in the Chinese market. In order to encourage the economic cooperation in creation for business condition, Macedonia and China signed the Trade and Economic Cooperation Agreement in 1995. Referring to China's relation with Macedonia, it can be concluded that the past year they have been doing well and steadily proceeding, and most of them manifested in economic effort. Until now, Macedonia and China have signed several types of agreements, including US investment for building school, health infrastructures, also project for construction the Miladinov Ship and Kichevo Highway. The presented indicators are only general indicators how much Macedonia needs this initiative and cooperation with China. Regarding the issues with European Union, Macedonia applied for EU membership on March 2004, and on December 2005, Presidency of European Council in Brussels granted Macedonia the status of the candidate for membership in the European Union. However, Macedonia is still waiting for date for starting negotiation with the European Union, almost 6 years. Perhaps the biggest problem with the negotiation with the European Union was the name, despite with neighbor Greece, but it was solved with the signing of the Prespa agreement. However, Bulgaria has emerged as a new problem, namely in anticipation of decision to start negotiation between Macedonia and European Union. Bulgaria on September 16 sent an explanatory memorandum to EU member state consisting of 6 pages with long historical explanation of the anti-Bulgarian ideology in Macedonia. Bulgaria opposed opening of negotiation with the government in Macedonia due to, as they say, the open issues with Macedonia regarding history and language. Nevertheless, despite with Bulgaria and the non-opening the negotiation framework are the reality for Macedonian citizens seriously undermining the credibility of the European Union. Given that elections are expected in Bulgaria, it is clear that this year and is unlikely that any progress will be made in solving that the imposed and absolutely unrealistic problem caused by the demands of Bulgaria. That means prospect for European Union membership, as we're not doing anything spectacular in separating historical issues from political and economic ones. Although the European Union find way to stimulate the Macedonian economy through grant and credit lines with fund and other sources, it still cannot fully achieve its strategic goals and ensure a full presence in the Macedonian economy and commodity market, precisely because of the inability to ensure the start of negotiation and the opening of chapters of negotiation framework. When we speak to Macedonia, about Macedonia with China and European Union, it should be mentioned that Macedonia sees its future as an integrated member of the European Union. However, one should not neglect what China has been doing in the last few years, because with the Belt and Road Initiative on 16+1 and investing in infrastructures and other projects in Macedonia. Macedonia will have the direct benefit from this project, and not to forget the recent statements about the modernization of the existing railway that will go from Belgrade to the border with Macedonia, where there is potential, and modernization of the railway to Greece. It's important to emphasize that the fact that last week we received 100,000 vaccines from China for a more successful fight against the pandemic, which were sent as donation from the Chinese to the Macedonian Ministry of Defense, and should be noted that the donation had a sticker with the text, "A friend in trouble is closer than a brother," which only confirms the Chinese friendship with Macedonia. On the other hand, we should not neglect the financial and other types of assistance the European Union sent to Macedonia to deal with COVID pandemic, which is also to be welcome. I personally see future of Macedonia integrated in the European Union, but until that happens, we need a strategic partner to raise the economic development and better life of the Macedonian citizen. China is ideal partner for us, and I expect the holders of power in Macedonia to be encouraged and to make step forward. Although some of the Macedonian companies trade with Chinese company, I still think that wine, tobacco, and some strategic product can find a better place in the Chinese market. On the other hand, development of renewable energy source in other branch of this energy sector, in addition to infrastructure project, are also a good potential from China for China's investment. I sincerely hope for increased cooperation in the future. I will write an article about this in maybe 50 pages, and after that you will see everything about Macedonia with European Union on China's. I speak Macedonia, but the official name is not Macedonia. For this reason, when I write my article, everything we will write for this name. Thank you for attention and good work.
Thank you, Professor Stamevsky. Now is a turn for another our Chinese colleague, Professor Yan Shanghua. Professor Yan Shanghua, are you with us? Yes, please turn
mute.
Professor Yan, microphone is yours.
Can you hear me?
Yes, of course.
Oh, okay. I'm running out of battery, so I try to be short. Thank you, Darko and Jimbo, for your efforts in organizing this event. I'm going to make some comments on European strategic autonomy. And I'm still in the very early stage of my research. So what I'm presenting are some very initial observations. We know European strategic autonomy has now become kind of the catchphrase in the European policy circle, right? It's being talked about by think tank people, both think tank people and European policy makers. And actually the debate picked up during the Trump administration in the context of its American first policy and also its retreat from the multilateral institutions, as well as its walking away from the European allies. And now we see that the US, with the Biden administration, the US is working to kind of relaunch the transatlantic union and revive the transatlantic partnership. So in this context, some people are questioning whether it is still necessary or whether Europe is willing to pursue a strategic autonomy. And from my opinion, the answer is yes. The European Union is continue to pursue strategic autonomy under the Biden administration because the world is a different one. For various reasons, I'm not going to go to that direction. So for me, European strategic autonomy is going to continue, it's going to prevail, it's going to guide European foreign policy in the long term. So it's become a kind of a policy reality there. And gradually, in the Chinese academic circle, people are beginning to pay attention to strategic autonomy. And Chinese scholars tend to look at European strategic autonomy in the context of transatlantic relations, thinking that is something between the EU and the United States. But I think European strategic autonomy is not just about the US and the EU, and China is actually part of the debate, right? And actually it is part of the driving forces behind European pursuit of strategic autonomy. And the future of European strategic autonomy will largely depend on its relations with great powers like the United States and China. So what does European strategic autonomy mean for China? I would say it is both, and there are both opportunities and challenges. It's a double sword for China. In terms of opportunity, I think the European strategic autonomy offers opportunity for China in three ways. First of all, European strategic autonomy is good for the multipolarization of world order. For a long time, China's worldview, it's a multipolar one, right? In which both China and Europe are important poles of this multipolarized world. And of course, Europe and China have different views on multilateralism and multipolarization. But still, I think European strategic autonomy is good. It's beneficial for the multipolarization of world order. And secondly, I think strategic autonomy means not divergence, but kind of independence from US policy towards China. We know that US and China is in a stage of strategic competition, and Europe is facing the question of, where to position itself, where to stand. And in this sense, strategic autonomy means that Europe is not going to simply choosing sides between Europe and between US and China. And certainly Europe is not simply following the US way, US policy of containing or decoupling from China, as some experts has pointed out. And thirdly, interdependence, independence from US policy towards China means that there are potential room for Europe to work autonomously with China, especially in the area of public health, climate change, nuclear non-proliferation, and other global challenges. But of course, European strategic autonomy, when Chinese talk about European strategic autonomy, we should be cautious that there could be potential challenges for China as well. And I think this will be manifested in various areas, especially in the area of economy, technology, and geopolitics. Economically, I think strategic autonomy means that there will be less dependence on China, with Europe trying to diversify its economy, in particular in critical supply chains. And also, European strategic autonomy means there will be more competition with China in the future, especially in the key industrial sectors, as Europe is trying to develop its own industrial policy. And secondly, in terms of technology, or technologically speaking, European strategic autonomy means that there will be more protectionism, in the sense that Europe will seek to limit the export of key technologies towards China, and at the same time tightening its control or tightening its screening framework on Chinese investments in Europe. As Dr. Ian mentioned, Europe is trying to judge Chinese investments against security standards. And geopolitically, strategic autonomy, as I say, it means that there will be increasing competition between the EU and China. Okay, that is manifested in the area of connectivity, as Dr. Ian has talked. And I also see there are potential geopolitical competition between Europe and China in different areas, especially in Western Balkans. As we see, the European Union has stepped up its engagement with Western Balkans, in part because of China's increasing engagement with the region. And we also see that recently the European Council has adopted a conclusion on Indo-Pacific cooperation strategy. Although there might be some differences between the EU's Indo-Pacific strategy and the US Indo-Pacific strategy, and it remains to be seen what the EU's Indo-Pacific strategy exactly means. But EU's Indo-Pacific strategy is surely in line with the pursuit of a geopolitical commission that President von der Leyen has promised to build. So in this context, I would also see potential geopolitical competition between Europe and China in the Indo-Pacific region. So in conclusion, there are both opportunities and challenges. And looking from a Chinese perspective, European strategic autonomy presents a very complicated picture. And how should China, respond? I think this is an important question for Chinese, scholars. I don't have a very clear answer for now. Maybe answers will be available when I submit the article for the journal. That's my conclusion for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. I think now we have room for 2 comments. If there is no, it is my, Danuta, please unmute the microphone. Unmute,
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. I'd like only to say that I congratulate Professor Jan for this interesting speech. I think I'd like to emphasize that the most important thing I think in geopolitical studies is the multipolar world. Professor Jan said about this multipolar world, which is necessary for geopolitical issues, I think. But on the other hand, there are many people, many scientists who say about the hegemonic rivalry between the most powerful states among, for example, China, USA, Russia. So there is a lot of hypothesis about there is China who will be the next hegemonic state. But I think that this competition in the balanced world is the most important and the most valuable thing. So I don't hope so that we couldn't live in the world in which some hegemonic state will be dominated. But the multipolar world is the very interesting option for all of us, and the balanced world, in fact. Thank you very much. Congratulations once again.
Thank you, Danuta. Now, without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Admiral Dimitrios. Dimitrios, sir, because now I think we start to talk about strategy and European Indo-Pacific strategy. I think you as a Contra-Admiral, it's your field. So, sir, the floor is yours.
Hi all. I'm delighted to have this opportunity to speak to such a distinguished professors on the subject on China-Europe strategic issues, and to share some thoughts with you about the European and Chinese relations in general, and about how it supports and contributes to your efforts in developing this webinar that has gathered to address. The timeless power of the Chinese state is due to the parameter of its long history and culture, like we like to say that in Greece. For most of its 5,000-year history, China was the center of civilization, a nation with a long memory for past lives. This rise in preeminence would as well erase the perceived century of humiliation that the country has suffered at the hand of Western invalid powers. China's grand strategy, as we see that, is aimed to these twin goals of restoring the country to its rightful place on the world stage and rectifying the wrongs of the past. China's decision makers, scholars, and professors have decreed that for the next decades, the country will be within a window of strategic opportunity, a period of peace and stability in the world. Having embraced globalization, China's economy is now the second largest in the world. But economic power is not China's goal. It is only a component of a country's ultimate aspiration to have a place of power and influence commensurate with the status it believes it should enjoy in the world. To achieve this goal, the Chinese has conceived the plan until 2050 to become a prosperous, democratic, and civilized socialist country at the medium level of development. During this stage, the four modernizations will be completed: agriculture, industry, science, and technology. China's goal is to be recognized internationally as an economic and political superpower. But to reach this stage, more than economic power is required. An element of military power is integral to achieving great power status. China has been following its own path for years, hiding its power and saving time. Today, however, the Chinese dragon, as we say, is not hiding. Chinese President Mr. Xi Jinping, is now officially claiming that we have entered a new era where the West is retreating and the East is emerging. The Chinese people have developed their patriotic concept very well. From then on, China, as we see from 2015 and then, with a new Silk Road, as we know, the One Belt, One Road initiative, is a Chinese economic and strategic agenda by which the two ends of Eurasia, as well as Africa and Oceania, Australia, are being more closely tied along two routes, one overload and one maritime. Is a fact growing in all sectors power of the Eastern region that its power in all aspects of public action seeks to extend in the West throughout agreements and alliance. China is abundantly an economic power. When in 2002, Chinese state managed to enter the World Trade Organization, Western powers were to alarm by its rapid development at international economic level that through mainly the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, CETA, C-E-T-A, unofficially Canadian European Trade Agreement, and TTIP, Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, between EU and United States, in an effort to take China out of the commercial game, which they were unable to achieve, as China, in a mad move, founded the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, on the one hand, through the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, and promotes regional cooperation with states in the wider region, such as Indonesia, South Korea, Laos, Philippines, and Thailand. China, however, is not only an economic power, but also a state that can play a stabilizing role in the eastern part because of its allied relations with Russia, but also the ever-developing relations with Israel. The Chinese state and France can be the diplomatic channels between East and West, and especially for us, the Greek peoples, for Greece, let alone the present days with the rapid spread of Turkish provocation. After all, President Macron's visit in 2018 in a particularly warm climate highlighted on both sides the need to create a great alliance between France, China, and Europe, which a few weeks ago began to take shape. It was a month ago, as we remember. At this point, we must focus and explain in what light China is creating its alliance. For example, we saw that in 2019, the Central Bank of China supported the slump in the Turkish lira, while at the same time, there was a series of investments projects on the part of the Chinese state in the neighboring country. Many analysts were to consider that this action creates new conditions for Turkish-Chinese relations. In my view, on the contrary, if we look at what sectors China investments in what China buys from Turkey is energy and infrastructure, all this must be put under a business plan of action and not interpreted under the framework of the alliance. Reading the diplomatic story of the Chinese state, it is shown that it creates strategic alliances only with states that have equivalent power in the global system. With all the other states, the relation it creates, we should interpret them in the context of the business process, business as usual. At the moment of a robust opening to Europe and the West, for example, the strengthening of relations with France and with Europe is general. The answer to the question, because China only creates alliances with powerful states, is very simple, in my view, and comes from the way it associates its traditional culture with the national interest. We must not escape the fact that the Chinese state was one of the first imperial states in the world history. A concept of state power that it continued to have even when it changed its political status quo. This was shown by the way it perceives its external environment. The policy of imposing power on the powerless regional environment is inspired by the method used the Han Dynasty, 1st century BC until 2nd century AD. Expansion by any means without the use of force is the way it adopts over time in its diplomacy to impose its power on the weak region. China, however, has not only grown economically, but has also made big jump in the military support. It started with an aircraft carrier construction program. It currently has 2 aircraft carriers, one of which is built on its own shipyards. While it is building the 3rd, it is expected to acquire at least 4 aircraft carriers in the near future. Although it has expressed at every opportunity that it is not pursuing a hegemonic agenda. It has said it aims to be an effective force around the world by opening its first overseas military base in Djibouti in Africa. The situation in the context of defense spending is much more impressive. While China's military spending in 1989 was about $20 billion, it increased more than 13 times by 2019 and exceeded in 2061 billion dollars today. As a result, China has become the 2nd highest military power in the world after the United States. In this point we have reached today, it seems that the great power competition between the West, leading by United States, and China goes beyond trade and technology, as the 2 states are increasingly preparing for a new Cold War, as the American says. Since the emergence of nuclear weapons in the mid-20th century, it is considered unlikely that 2 nuclear powers will clash with each other. As a result, conflicts either take place in other proxy states to take place in the global public. Oceans, space, and cyberspace, defined as global commons, are vital for great powers. Global commons are essential for powerful states to maintain their influence on the international political science, the global economy, the transport routes. In this context, it would not be wrong to claim that global sources will be the main ground in the great rivalry between West and China, which is expected to become even more serious in the coming period. In this context, we must look at the relationship it is developing with Turkey, which is based on the dipole of strong and powerless, and not on the context of allied status. In conclusion, we can say this century is being shaped by China's economic rise. China is using its growing economic power and influence to rise peacefully within the current world order. indication are that for the most part, a realistic China has chosen to take advantage of an environment that rewards multilateralism, as a previous professor said, and engagement at the international level to further its economic and strategist interests. It intends to ride the wave of economic growth to maximize its status in the world. China has shaken off its isolationism tendencies and is building with growing confidence a web of bilateral and multinational agreements that have solidified its power and influence in Southeast Asia and, of course, with Europe. Still, there are issues such as human rights, military expansion, and repression of secessionist movements that have raised apprehension with regard to China's true intentions. Of course, a global view of China's action should be taken and consideration should be given as to how much progress China has achieved on issues on concern to the West. China is now a more society and greater information is available as to what is happening inside the country. Yes, the military forces are modernizing and becoming a more capable institution, but not unreasonably so for a large country that relies so much on trade and export for its wealth, while the soft power persuasion is slowly pulling Taiwan towards closer ties with mainland China. If China is increasingly using soft power on the international scene, it has yet to learn to apply the same level of sophistication when dealing with internal issues. Still, this internal struggle should not completely erase China's increasingly positive involvement in world affairs. So Europe understands it needs to get tougher on China, treating it as a systemic rival and security challenge, not just a trade partner. But the position is not homogeneous. Europe needs to forge a common approach within Europe's trade competitiveness, and Germany's in particular, given its export and investment exposure to China, cultivates economic dependency and geopolitical shyness. Europeans realize that cannot claim strategic autonomy if they are dependent on China for health supplies and become dependent on China in 5G and artificial intelligence. And they realize that Beijing's expanding economic influence through targeted strategic investment could translate into rival geopolitical influence. Finally, I'm going to close my thoughts. Europe is ready to work with the United States on China, but not exactly on US terms. The United States also has to make some steps toward the EU, for instance, recognizing that China is a necessary partner for global multilateral objectives like climate. Europe is right to insist that a Cold War rhetoric from the United States toward China could easily escalate into self-fulfilling prophecies and confrontation that all sides should wish to avoid. Thank you very much, Professor Dargo.
Thank you, Admiral. Thank you so much. And I think we have now a lot of questions. But I suggesting that we finish with Professor Jian Junbo, co-organizer of these events from FUDAN. And then I think we will have much more time for Q&A. I will short my presentation because I think I already spoke enough. So first of all, Professor Jian, I would like to thank you on behalf of all for the joint events and all efforts from your side to gather our Chinese colleagues. And of course, many thanks to Professor Xu Minqi, who is always with us in our shadow. So Professor Jian, floor is yours, sir.
Okay, thank you, Darko. I think much of the work is done by you. So thank you very much for your organization for the conference, which can be successful. My topic about my speech is about Europe's Indo-Pacific policy and its implication for China. As we know, now several European Union member states and the EU have issued the Indo-Pacific strategy or the policies papers. You know, the France has issued firstly the European countries Indo-Pacific policy, but this policy is focusing much more on the defense policy. And but if we can see the Germany's policy, it's much more focus is on the societal and the economic areas. So there are some difference between among the Indo-Pacific policies or strategies among the European Union countries and the EU. But there is one common feature that any countries and including the European Union, the Indo-Pacific strategy or the policy strengthens the military cooperation with Indo-Pacific countries. So I want to say that it means the change of the EU's general policy because I think generally the European Union consider itself as a normative power, but now it much more and more strengthens the military cooperation and military engagement in the state countries in Asia, Indo-Pacific areas. So I can say that this is the change of the European Union as a normative power to a non-normative power. So I think this is a very essential change of the European Union. So, but this change, what's the implication for China or for China-European relations? I think, of course, there is a challenge for China, and also maybe there is some chances for China. About the challenge, I think, of course, in the opinion of China's side, this Indo-Pacific strategy or the policies will provoke the instability in the region, Indo-Pacific area, because, you know, due to the engagement of the European Union's military action, and some countries, especially, has some disputes with China, will be stimulated to take some action against China. And there are some issues in this area related to China. Will be hot issues such as issue about the South China Sea or the border issues with India and island dispute with Japan, and maybe the Taiwan issue will also be very hot in this area. So I think this for China, this the Europe strategy or the policy of the Indo-Pacific will provoke or stimulate the much more issues in this region. This is a very big challenge for China. And the second challenge is that this policy will enhance the rivalry or the hostility between China and Europe, because China thinks this policy will provoke the disputes between China and its neighboring countries. So this can be considered, the policy can be considered by China as unfriendly, policy or the action toward China. So this will be. This will make trouble, between China and Europe. So this is a second challenge, for the China-EU relations. And the other challenge is that because of the engagement of the European Union and its member states in this area, and this will make the instability in the area. So it's not benefit. It doesn't benefit Chinese economic growth, because according to China's opinion, a good environment, regional environment is the regional stability is a base for the Chinese development. So if regional instability in this area, so it's not good for Chinese economic growth. So these are challenges for China. But I think there is also some chances for China or Chinese or China-Europe relations, because first they can have some chances to cooperate in some areas. For example, the first one is the collectivity, just as I mentioned by some persons. Because not only the China, but also the European Union and its members also have the plan, the collective plan in the area to, for example, to promote the logistical transport system in Indo-Pacific area. So I think because the China, for example, have a very big, very rich experience in this area. So and maybe I think, of course, this collectivity cooperation, I think this is just a potential, but not a reality. But there are some also much real cooperation in some other areas, for example, for the regional security. In this area, both China and the European Union and the European Union's countries consider the free aviation and also very strengthening the the safety in this area. So I think they can cooperate to, for example, fight against the pirates, fight against the organized crimes, and also some other issues about security in this area. So this is, I think, is a very possible cooperation in this region. And the second, I think, is some other areas also can cooperate. For example, the climate change, the poverty reduction, and maybe the biological diversity in this area, because, for example, in the Germany's Indo-Pacific policy, they have some sentences, in the paper of this strategy. The Germany said they have the plan to cooperate with China. So I think China will welcome this suggestion to cooperate in these areas, in this region. So they have some potential cooperation in many areas in this region. And but I will say what's the future of this European Union's Indo-Pacific strategy or policy. I think it's based on or depend on several factors. The first one is the European Union. because till now there are just several countries, Germany, France, and Holland have issued the Indo-Pacific policy. But I don't know. There are some other members they issued the policy. Maybe there are some others, but I think anyway there is no any consensus on the policy toward China in this region, because the members have different opinions, different standpoints on China, so, and different interests in this region. So I think if EU take a action, toward China in this region, I think they should have the common agreement among the members. But I think this unity among the European countries, I think it's not very, the unity we are not so strong as we imagine. So this is the first factor, the European Union. The second, I think, is of course the China's opinion, China's response. If the European countries, for example, France, they take a very attactive or the offensive military action in this region, I think the China will, especially engaging in the issues related to China's territory or waters. So I think China will has a very strong response to the European countries' action in this region. So the Chinese response to the European countries' action in this region, I think, is very important factor to influence the implementation of the European countries or European Union's Indo-Pacific in this region. So I think the European Union will, because China also is very big, for example, a market for the European Union, a very big, important partner for Europe. So I think the European Union will finally keep a balance between the European Union's relations and also the Pacific of the Indo-Pacific strategy. So I think China is the second factor. The third factor is India. As we know, the India is very important factor in the Indo-Pacific policy strategy of the European Union and its member states. So through this policy or through this platform, and the India can engage in the Pacific issue, and especially engage in the issues related to China. So, but how what's the degree of the engagement of India to provoke the China, because India is also a great power in Asia, and it has independent foreign policy, and so it cannot follow everything of the European Union or even the United States. So if as a neighbor of China, so I think India will keep its own independent diplomacy. So this is a very third factor of the implementation of the European Union's Indo-Pacific strategy. The last one factor, important factor, I think, is ASEAN, because ASEAN also has, it's the Indo-Pacific strategy, and in the opinion of the ASEAN, and ASEAN should be the center of the Indo-Pacific areas, and it should play the key and a core role in this region. So I think ASEAN, of course, is also very big partner, very important partner of the European Union, if to take the policy in this region. So if the ASEAN has its own, attitude and their own policy of the Indo-Pacific region. So I think the European Union cannot, how can I say, cooperate with ASEAN against China. So I think, of course, I think the European Union's Indo-Pacific strategy, including the member states' policy, is not very, very clear. And just now, it's I think it's just the outline. For example, the European Union we have the policy in September. Just now, it's just the guidelines. So anyway. I think the European Union's Indo-Pacific strategy is different from the United States, it's different from the India, it's different from any other countries. Anyway, but its successful should be its success in the future should be based on how to deal with the relations with any important countries in this region. But it should be, cautious, to deal with any relations with this region. With relations with China, with India, with ASEAN, with Japan. But these countries, among these countries, there are many issues. So I think the European Union should be careful to deal with these issues, and then should be successful. Also, if not, the European Union, I think, cannot go too much if it's just how can I say, put the warships, into the waters in this region and against China, uniting some other so-called the value unions against China. I think this will be provoke very big trouble in this region, and they undermine the relationship between EU and China. I mean, this will not benefit, EU's interests. That's my idea. Stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Jian. So we are now almost 3.5 hours. So I look that there is interest in this topic, and I hope in our articles and introduction to our special issue of the journal, we shall maybe create the wall or white paper according to our opinion from science, where Europe and China can easily cooperate, and what is, let's say, the issue that are problematic for both sides, or each member of states of EU or Europe, of course, from Europe, what is bothering each other, etc., etc. So this is, I think, the best way, because our intention is, after publishing the article, of course, with our recommendation and maybe advice, opinions, whatever, we would like to submit our special issue of the journal to European Commission. We would like to submit this special issue to many addresses in Europe, and we are counting also that you will as well submit a copy of the journal with an escorted letter to Chinese leadership, because we know that President of FUDAN is advisor of the President of China, as well as Professor Xi Minqi and his connection directly to Beijing and other places. So I think we are already too long here. I will I already think I speak too much. It is a great our, let's say, intention to communicate, to find out all the time place for dialogue, to find out all the time our arm in the air to shake the hands, because every dialogue is better more than every rocket. And we are now seeing the situation in Ukraine, situation in Balkan, situation in Middle East, and more places that big powers like China, Russia, United States, and some other regional and local countries can confront. And I think in the past, someone maybe please forgive me all if if my words are too strong, working as a first secretary to United Nations and watching for 3 years Security Council and many UN bodies. I think we from science, our voice are ignored very often, and very often our voice are not even raised to basically to address some important issue, and our voice from science with no reasons is avoid or intentionally, let's say, overlap how to solve some kind of the problem, how to deal with the different issues. So if there is some questions, please do it. If not, I would like to say thanks to all. It was a great place, great opportunity, and of course on timely we're going to inform you about our next event. It's as I said, it's Europe, India, Japan, relations with our colleagues other places on the world. And again, I would like to call all participants to submit their articles before August 31st. Thank you so much, and have a nice day, and we will be in touch. All the best.
Okay, thank you, Darko, for organizing this discussion and seminar. I think it's good. Although we have some different views, but common grounds are there. Issue that the European EU, including non-EU member countries and China, have a big room for future cooperation. And if the differences are still there, I think that we can also discuss how to, tackle and solve these issues between us. I think it's good for the think tank and scholars to discuss. And thank you for the efforts made by Darko and Jimbo. And I'm glad that if Darko can publish a special issue on the topic of EU-China cooperation, and with the contribution of participants and many others, I think it would be very good. And as always, Shanghai Institute for European Studies will be happy to provide also support. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. All the best. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.